Victor Hale never lost control. Until tonight. The most dangerous man in the city stood frozen at his window, watching his house manager, the one woman he'd kept at arm's length for 3 years, slide into another man's car. Ryan Cole, his lieutenant, his friend. The jealousy that ripped through him was so violent it scared him. This is the story of a crime lord who ruled an empire but couldn't control his own heart. Stay until the end, drop a like and comment your city so I can see how far this story travels. Because what happens next? Nobody saw it coming. The Avalon estate sat on 12 acres of manicured darkness, the kind of property that made people drive slower when they passed it. Not out of admiration, out of fear. Everyone in the city knew who lived there. Victor Hale didn't need signs or security gates to announce his presence. His reputation did that work for him. Inside, the mansion was all clean lines and cold luxury. Marble floors that echoed, floor-to-ceiling windows that showed everything and revealed nothing. Art that cost more than most people's houses. It looked like a museum, and in some ways it was, a monument to power, control, and the kind of wealth that came from places polite society didn't ask about. Elena Cross moved through those halls like a ghost. That's what she'd trained herself to be over the past 3 years. Invisible, efficient, present but not noticed. She managed the estate with the precision of a Swiss watch. Staff schedules, maintenance, supplies, security rotations, everything that kept Victor's world running smoothly while he focused on running his empire. She was good at it. Maybe too good. 27 years old, dark hair always pulled back, clothes always professional but never memorable. She'd perfected the art of blending into expensive wallpaper. It was safer that way. Safer for her heart, which had made the catastrophic mistake of falling for her employer somewhere around month 6 of working for him. Victor Hale was 42, 15 years her senior, and completely untouchable. Not because of his age, not because of his wealth, not even because of what he did for a living, though that was complicated enough. No, Victor was untouchable because he'd built walls around himself that made the mansion's security look like a joke. Emotional walls, the kind that kept everyone at exactly the distance he wanted them. Elena had watched those walls for 3 years. She'd studied them like an archaeologist studying ruins, looking for cracks, for ways in, for any sign that underneath all that ice was something human. She'd found nothing. Or at least that's what she told herself on the bad days. On the good days, the rare ones, she'd catch him looking at her, and for just a second something would flicker in those pale gray eyes. Something that made her breath catch. Something that made her think maybe, just maybe. But then it would be gone, shuttered, locked away behind that perfect control he wielded like a weapon. Tonight was shaping up to be one of the bad days. Elena stood in the kitchen, though calling it a kitchen was like calling the Pacific Ocean a puddle. It was a chef's dream, all professional-grade equipment and granite countertops, designed to cater parties of 50 without breaking a sweat. Right now it was quiet, just Elena and Maria, the head cook, finishing up the evening's tasks. "You look tired, mija," Maria said, her accent thick and warm. She'd been with the estate longer than Elena, had seen staff come and go, had probably seen things Elena couldn't imagine, but she never talked about them. That was the rule here. You saw nothing. You said nothing. You survived. "I'm fine," Elena said automatically. "You're always fine. That's the problem." Maria dried her hands on a towel, studying Elena with the kind of look that saw too much. "When's the last time you went out? Did something for yourself?" "I went out last week." "To the grocery store doesn't count." Elena managed a smile. "I like grocery stores. You like being alone. That's different." Maria hung up the towel with the finality of someone closing an argument. "You're young. You should be living, not just existing in this big empty place." The words hit harder than they should have. Maybe because they were true. Maybe because Elena had been thinking the same thing lately, lying in her room in the staff wing, staring at the ceiling, wondering what the hell she was doing with her life. Waiting, that's what. Waiting for a man who'd never want her. Waiting for something that was never going to happen. "I should finish the inventory," Elena said, changing the subject with all the subtlety of a brick through a window. Maria just shook her head, but she let it drop. "Don't stay up too late." "Never do." That was a lie. Elena stayed up late most nights, usually working in her small office off the main hallway, catching up on paperwork, or sometimes just sitting there in the dark, listening to the house settle around her. listening for his footsteps on the floor above. Pathetic. That's what she was. Pathetic and stuck and in love with someone who probably didn't even think of her as a real person, just another piece of the machinery that kept his life running. She was heading toward her office when she heard voices in the main foyer, male voices. One of them was Victor's. She'd know that voice anywhere, low and measured, the kind of voice that didn't need to be raised to command attention. The other took her a second to place. Ryan Cole. Elena paused in the hallway, not quite eavesdropping, but not quite leaving either. Ryan was Victor's lieutenant, had been for years. Where Victor was ice, Ryan was easier to read, still dangerous, still part of that world, but with something more human underneath. He smiled sometimes, laughed occasionally, seemed to remember that life existed outside of power plays and territory disputes. He also, Elena had noticed over the past few months, seemed to notice her. Not in a creepy way. Not even in an obvious way, just he saw her, acknowledged her, asked how she was doing like he actually wanted to know the answer. It was such a small thing, but after 3 years of being invisible, it had started to mean something. Tomorrow night, Ryan was saying. Just dinner, nothing fancy. Elena's stomach did something complicated. Were they talking about her? She won't go. Victor's voice. Flat. Certain. Why not? She's not a prisoner here. A pause. Elena held her breath. Do what you want. Victor's footsteps moving away toward his study. The conversation apparently over because he'd decided it was over. Elena ducked into her office before Ryan could spot her, her heart doing acrobatics in her chest. She sat down at her desk, staring blankly at her computer screen, trying to process what she'd just heard. Ryan wanted to ask her out. To dinner. And Victor had essentially given his blessing, or at least hadn't forbidden it, which for Victor was basically the same thing. She should feel happy about that. Excited. Ryan was attractive, kind, seemed genuinely interested in her as a person. This was what normal people did. They went on dates, they got to know each other, they built relationships that weren't based on hopeless yearning for unavailable men. So why did she feel like crying? The knock on her doorframe made her jump. Ryan stood there, leaning against the doorway with an easy casualness that Victor had never possessed in his life. He was 35, dark hair, dark eyes, the kind of good-looking that made him dangerous in a completely different way than Victor's cold beauty. Hey, he said. Got a minute? Of course. Elena straightened papers that didn't need straightening, buying herself time. What's up? Ryan stepped into the small office, and suddenly the space felt even smaller. I'm going to cut straight to it because I'm not great at dancing around things. Would you have dinner with me tomorrow night? Actual dinner, at a restaurant, not here. Like a date. Elena's mouth went dry. Hearing it directly was different than overhearing the aftermath. This required an actual response, a decision. She thought about Victor's voice. She won't go. So certain, so dismissive, like he knew her better than she knew herself. Like she was predictable. Like she was a piece of furniture that stayed exactly where it was put. Yes, she said, and watched Ryan's face light up. I'd like that. Yeah? He grinned and it transformed his whole face. Okay, great. I'll pick you up at 7? 7's perfect. After he left, Elena sat very still in her office, wondering what the hell she'd just done. Also wondering why part of her hoped Victor had been listening. Hoped he'd heard her say yes. Hoped it bothered him even a fraction as much as watching him exist bothered her every single day. Upstairs, in his private study, Victor Hale stood at the window that overlooked the front drive, a glass of bourbon in his hand that he wasn't drinking. He'd heard every word. The study was his sanctuary, the one place in this enormous house that was entirely his. Dark wood, leather furniture, shelves lined with books he actually read. No windows except this one, which he'd specifically designed to give him a view of anyone coming or going from the property. Control. That's what the window represented. His ability to see threats coming, to know who was entering his territory, to maintain the careful order he'd spent years building. Right now, that control felt like it was developing cracks. Victor had built his empire on discipline, on the ability to compartmentalize, to separate emotion from necessity, to make hard choices without flinching. It had served him well, made him powerful, made him rich, made him feared. It had also made him alone. That hadn't bothered him before. Alone was safe. Alone meant no vulnerabilities, no pressure points an enemy could exploit. In his line of work, caring about people was a liability. Love was a weapon someone else could use against you. He'd learned that lesson early and learned it hard. So when Elena Cross had walked into his house 3 years ago for the job interview, he'd made a decision. She was qualified, efficient, had excellent references. She was also beautiful in a way that made his chest tight, which meant she was dangerous. But he'd needed someone, and he'd convinced himself he could handle it, could maintain the distance, could treat her like any other employee. He'd been wrong. For 3 years, he'd watched her move through his house, managing his life with a competence that should have made her invisible, but somehow did the opposite. She was everywhere. In the perfectly organized schedules, the smoothly running household, the small details that he'd stopped having to think about because she thought about them for him. She anticipated his needs before he voiced them. She learned his preferences without being told. She made his life easier in 1,000 tiny ways that added up to something he didn't want to examine too closely. And somewhere along the way, sometime when he wasn't paying attention, or maybe when he was paying too much attention, she'd slipped past his defenses. Not through the walls. That would have been easier to defend against. No, she'd gone under them, like water finding cracks in a foundation, eroding something fundamental until one day he'd looked at her and realized the distance he'd so carefully maintained had become the hardest thing he'd ever done. He wanted her. More than that, he cared about her. And caring was exactly what he'd spent his entire adult life avoiding. So he'd done what he always did with problems he couldn't solve. He'd locked it down, controlled it, kept it buried so deep that some days he almost convinced himself it wasn't real. But now Ryan wanted to take her to dinner. Ryan, who was a good man, who would treat her right, who didn't come with the kind of baggage and danger that followed Victor like a shadow, who could give her something resembling a normal life. Victor should be happy about that, relieved even. Solved his problem. If Elena was with Ryan, she was safe, protected, and Victor could go back to maintaining his careful isolation without the constant temptation of her presence undermining his control. She won't go, he'd said to Ryan, because some irrational part of him believed it. Believed she felt it too, this thing between them that neither of them acknowledged. Believed that despite all his efforts to keep distance, she'd somehow seen through to whatever was underneath and decided to stay anyway. But she'd said yes. And now Victor stood at his window, watching the darkness beyond the glass, feeling something he hadn't felt in years. Jealousy. It was sharp and ugly and completely inappropriate. Elena wasn't his. She'd never been his. He'd made sure of that with every cold word, every maintained distance, every time he'd treated her like just another employee when what he really wanted. He stopped that thought before it could finish. Wanting was weakness, and Victor Hale couldn't afford weakness. His phone buzzed. Business. Always business. Someone needed something, some problem required his attention, some piece of his empire needed adjusting. This was his life. This was what he'd chosen. This was what he was good at. So why did it suddenly feel hollow? Elena didn't sleep well that night. She lay in her small but comfortable room in the staff wing, not quite servant quarters, not quite living space, somewhere in between, and stared at the ceiling, her mind refusing to shut off. What was she doing? Tomorrow night she'd go to dinner with Ryan Cole. She'd smile and make conversation and try to be normal, try to feel something that wasn't this constant ache for a man who'd never want her back. Maybe that's what she needed. Maybe spending time with someone who actually saw her as a person, not just a function, would help. Maybe she could learn to want something real instead of this fantasy she'd been nursing. Or maybe she'd spend the whole dinner wishing she was somewhere else, with someone else. She rolled over, punching her pillow into a different shape like that was the problem. Through her window, she could see a sliver of the main house, could see the light still on in Victor's study. He kept late hours, always working, always managing the dozens of threads that made up his organization. She'd learned his rhythms over the years, knew when he'd be in the study, when he'd be in meetings, when he'd take his single glass of bourbon at the window. She probably knew his schedule better than he did. That's what made this so stupid. She knew him, really knew him, knew that he took his coffee black, that he hated phone calls but tolerated them, that he read history books when he couldn't sleep, that sometimes when he thought no one was watching, His face would do this thing, just for a second, where the mask slipped and something incredibly sad looked out. But knowing someone wasn't the same as being let in, and Victor had never let anyone in, maybe didn't know how anymore. Elena's phone lit up on her nightstand. A text from Ryan. Looking forward to tomorrow. Sleep well. Sweet. Normal. Exactly the kind of thing a healthy relationship started with. She texted back, "You too." Then she turned off her phone and pulled the covers over her head, feeling like the worst kind of coward. The next day dragged. Elena threw herself into work. There was always work, but her mind kept drifting. To tonight. To what she'd wear. To what Ryan would be like outside of this house, away from Victor's orbit. To whether this was a terrible mistake or the smartest thing she'd done in years. Victor was nowhere to be seen. That wasn't unusual. He often spent days locked in his study or out at meetings, handling business she didn't ask about. But today his absence felt pointed, like he was avoiding her, which was ridiculous. Victor Hale didn't avoid anyone. He just prioritized his time. By 6 o'clock, Elena was back in her room, staring at her closet like it had personally offended her. She didn't own a lot of date clothes. Didn't really own a lot of anything that wasn't professional and practical. Her wardrobe was built for blending in, not standing out. She finally settled on a simple black dress. Classic, safe, the kind of thing that could go to a nice restaurant without trying too hard. She left her hair down for once, added minimal makeup, looked at herself in the mirror and tried to feel like someone going on a date instead of someone going to their execution. "You can do this," she told her reflection. "It's just dinner. Normal people do this all the time." Her reflection didn't look convinced. At 7 exactly, her phone buzzed. "Ryan, outside whenever you're ready." Elena grabbed her small purse, took one last look in the mirror and headed out before she could talk herself out of it. The main house was quiet as she walked through it. Most of the staff had the evening off. Maria was visiting her sister. The security team was there but invisible, the way they were supposed to be. Just Elena's footsteps on marble, echoing in all that expensive emptiness. She didn't let herself look toward Victor's study, didn't let herself wonder if he was watching, just kept moving forward out the front door into the warm evening air. Ryan stood by his car, a sleek black sedan that screamed money but not as loudly as Victor's vehicles. He smiled when he saw her, and it was genuine, warm. "You look beautiful," he said. "Thanks. You clean up pretty well yourself." He did. Dark suit, no tie, looking relaxed and confident in a way that should have made her feel at ease. Ryan opened the car door for her, and as Elena slid into the passenger seat, she caught movement in her peripheral vision. Just a flicker. But when she looked up at the mansion, she could swear she saw someone in Victor's study window, watching. Then Ryan closed the door, and the moment was gone. They drove in comfortable silence for a few minutes, leaving the estate behind, heading toward the city lights in the distance. The restaurant Ryan had chosen was in the nice part of downtown, the kind of place with white tablecloths and wine lists the size of phone books. "I wasn't sure you'd say yes," Ryan said finally, glancing at her as he drove. "Why not?" He shrugged. "You're hard to read. Always so composed, professional. I figured you'd politely turn me down and that would be that." Elena looked out the window at the passing scenery. "I almost did." "What changed your mind?" Good question. The honest answer was complicated and sad, and would make this dinner very awkward. So instead she said, "I thought it might be nice to do something normal." "Normal," Ryan repeated, like he was testing the word. "Yeah, not a lot of that in our world, is there?" "Your world," Elena corrected gently. "I just manage the house." "Come on, Elena. You've been there 3 years. You know what Victor does. What we all do. You're part of it, whether you want to be or not." She supposed that was true. You didn't work in Victor Hale's home without knowing the score, without understanding that the money came from places that existed in legal gray areas at best, without hearing things, seeing things, choosing to look the other way. "I keep the house running," Elena said carefully. "That's all. And you do it better than anyone ever has. Victor's life was chaos before you. Now it runs like a machine. You think he doesn't notice that?" Something in her chest twisted. Does he notice? Or does he just expect it? Ryan didn't answer right away. When he did, his voice was softer. He notices. He's just not great at showing it, not great at showing much of anything, really. They arrived at the restaurant before Elena could figure out how to respond to that. The place was elegant without being stuffy, crowded enough to feel alive, but not so packed that conversation was impossible. The host greeted Ryan by name, because of course Ryan was the type to be known at nice restaurants, and led them to a booth in the back. "Wine?" Ryan asked after they were seated. "Please." He ordered a bottle of something red that probably cost more than Elena's weekly salary. She tried not to think about that. Tried not to think about how this was all part of that world Ryan had mentioned. The money, the power, the way people treated you differently when you were connected to someone like Victor Hale. "So," Ryan said after the wine arrived and they'd placed their orders, "tell me something about yourself that has nothing to do with work." Elena laughed. It came out more bitter than she intended. "Is there anything else?" "Has to be. You didn't just spring into existence 3 years ago as a fully formed house manager." "Fair point. I grew up in the suburbs, normal family, normal childhood. Went to college for hospitality management. Worked at a few hotels, a country club, then saw the posting for Victor's position." "Why'd you take it? Most people hear his name and run the other direction." Another good question, another complicated answer. "The money was good. The challenge was interesting. And? Elena took a sip of wine, buying time. "And I guess I was curious. About him. About that world. From the outside, it all seemed so dramatic, dangerous. I wanted to see what it was really like." "And what's it really like?" "Quieter than I expected. More boring, actually. A lot of paperwork and scheduling and making sure the right people get paid at the right time. Not very cinematic." Ryan smiled. "That's because you're seeing the back end, the machinery. Trust me, the front end gets plenty dramatic." "I know." And she did. She'd seen Victor come home with blood on his shirt once, had heard raised voices from meetings that ended with slammed doors, had felt the tension in the house when something went wrong, when the careful balance of power shifted. She'd also seen Victor handle it all with that same cold control. Nothing rattled him. Nothing broke through. Except maybe tonight. That thought came unbidden, and Elena pushed it away. She was here with Ryan. She needed to focus on that, on this moment, on this chance at something real. "What about you?" she asked, deflecting. "How'd you end up working for Victor?" "Long story, short version. I made some bad choices when I was younger, ended up in debt to some very bad people. Victor cleared my debt. In exchange, I worked for him. Was supposed to be temporary, but..." Ryan shrugged. "Turns out I'm good at what I do. And Victor treats his people well, long as you're loyal. So I stayed." "Are you?" Elena asked. "Loyal?" "Very. Victor saved my life. I don't forget that." Ryan leaned forward slightly. "But that doesn't mean I think he's perfect. He's not. He's brilliant and terrifying and probably the most disciplined person I've ever met. But he's also closed off, isolated. It's like he forgot how to be human somewhere along the way." Elena's throat tightened. "Maybe he had to survive. Maybe. Or maybe he's just scared." That caught her off guard. "Scared? Victor? Why not? Being vulnerable is scary. Letting people in is scary, especially when you've got as much to lose as he does." Ryan studied her across the table, his dark eyes seeing too much. "You care about him." It wasn't a question. Elena felt her face flush. "He's my employer." "Elena." The way he said her name, gentle but firm, made her defenses crumble. She looked down at her wine glass, watching the dark liquid catch the light. "Yes," she said quietly. "I care about him. I know it's stupid. I know nothing can ever happen. I know he doesn't think of me that way. But yeah, I care. And I'm tired of caring, Ryan. I'm tired of waiting for something that's never going to happen. That's why I'm here. I need to move on." The confession hung between them. Ryan reached across the table and took her hand, and his touch was warm, kind. "I appreciate your honesty," he said. "And for what it's worth, Victor's an idiot." Elena let out a surprised laugh. "That's not exactly what I expected you to say." "It's true, though. You're incredible. Smart, capable, beautiful. The fact that he's too stubborn or scared to see that is his loss. Ryan, I'm not saying this to make you feel better. I'm saying it because it's true. And because I like you, Elena. Have for a while now. So if you want to use tonight as a way to move on, I'm here for that. But I'm also here if you want something more. It was the perfect thing to say. The right mix of understanding and interest. Ryan was a good man. A safe choice. Someone who could actually offer her a relationship instead of this endless yearning. So why couldn't she just let herself feel it? They finished dinner, making lighter conversation, and it was nice. Easy. Ryan told stories about Victor in the early days, before he'd become quite so untouchable. Elena talked about some of the more ridiculous requests she'd handled as a house manager. The time Victor wanted his entire library reorganized by color, then by subject, then back to alphabetical within 48 hours. The exotic fish that had required a marine biologist on speed dial. By the time they left the restaurant, Elena was relaxed, almost convinced herself this could work. Then they stepped outside and she saw him. Victor. He was across the street, leaning against his car, a black Aston Martin that probably cost more than the restaurant. And even from that distance, Elena could feel the weight of his stare. "Oh, hell," Ryan muttered beside her. Victor started walking toward them, and it was like watching a predator move. All controlled power and barely leashed tension. He was dressed in all black, slacks, shirt, jacket, and his face could have been carved from ice. "Ryan," he said when he reached them. His voice was perfectly calm, perfectly level. Somehow, that made it worse. "Elena." "Victor." Ryan's hand moved to Elena's lower back, a protective gesture that didn't go unnoticed. "Didn't expect to see you here." Clearly, Victor's pale gray eyes flicked between them, and Elena felt like she was being dissected. "We need to talk." "We're kind of in the middle of something," Ryan said carefully. "Now." It wasn't a request. It was never a request with Victor. Elena found her voice. "It's fine, Ryan. I'll handle this." "You sure?" "No." "Yes." Ryan looked like he wanted to argue, but he knew better than anyone how pointless that would be. "I'll wait by the car." After he walked away, Elena turned to Victor, and up close, she could see the cracks in his control, the muscle ticking in his jaw, the way his hands were shoved in his pockets like he was physically restraining himself. "What are you doing here?" she asked. "I could ask you the same thing." "I'm on a date." "Which you knew about, which you told Ryan was fine." "I changed my mind." Elena's temper, which she'd kept carefully leashed for 3 years, finally snapped. "You don't get to change your mind. You don't get to ignore me for 3 years and then show up and what, Victor? What exactly are you doing?" "Stopping you from making a mistake." "A mistake?" She laughed, and it was sharp enough to cut. "Ryan is kind and interested and actually treats me like a person. How is that a mistake?" "He's not right for you." "And who is?" "You?" The word hung there, and Elena watched Victor's face do something complicated. For just a second, just a heartbeat, the mask slipped and she saw pain, want, fear. Then it was gone, locked down, controlled. "Go home, Elena," he said quietly. "No." "That wasn't a request. And I don't work for you right now. I'm off the clock. So unless you're planning to physically drag me back to the estate, I'm finishing my date." She turned to walk away, and his hand shot out, catching her wrist. Not hard, not bruising, but firm enough to stop her. "Don't." His voice was raw now, the control fracturing. "Don't do this." "Don't do what? Live my life? Try to be happy? Stop waiting for you to—" She cut herself off, horrified at what she'd almost said. But it was too late. Victor's eyes widened fractionally, and she knew he'd heard it anyway, heard what she hadn't said. "Elena." Her name in his mouth, rough and desperate, and nothing like the cold professionalism he usually maintained. "You don't understand." "Then help me understand. Tell me what this is. Tell me why you're here, why you care who I have dinner with, why you've been—" Her voice broke. "Why you've been driving me crazy for 3 years." "Because I can't." Victor stopped, breathed. She could see him fighting himself, fighting years of discipline and control. "You deserve better than this. Than me. Ryan can give you a life. A real life. I can only give you... What? What can you give me? The question seemed to break something in him. He pulled her closer, and suddenly they were inches apart, and Elena could see every detail of his face, the silver at his temples, the faint scar by his left eye, the way his pupils were blown wide. Nothing, he said hoarsely. I can give you nothing but danger and complications and a life that will never be normal. That's why I stayed away. That's why I kept the distance, because you deserve better, and I'm not... I can't or won't. Both. Neither. I don't know anymore. His other hand came up, cupping her face, and his touch was gentle in a way she'd never imagined he could be. All I know is I've spent 3 years trying not to feel this, and watching you with him tonight, I realized I can't. I can't watch you with someone else. I can't pretend you're just another employee. I can't keep lying to both of us. Elena's heart was hammering so hard she thought it might break through her ribs. Then don't. For a moment she thought he might kiss her. He looked like he wanted to, like every muscle in his body was straining toward her, but then he stepped back, dropping his hands, and the mask slammed back down. I'll drive you home, he said, and his voice was cold again, controlled, like the last 2 minutes hadn't happened. I came with Ryan. I'll drive you home, Victor repeated. Tell Ryan something came up. Business. He'll understand. And if I don't want to go with you? Victor's jaw tightened. Then I'll ask. Please, Elena, let me take you home. The please nearly undid her. She'd never heard him say that word before, never heard him ask for anything instead of commanding it. She looked over at Ryan, still waiting by his car, and felt a wave of guilt. He'd been nothing but kind, nothing but honest. And here she was, apparently willing to throw that away because Victor Hale had finally shown a crack in his armor. But she couldn't help it. 3 years of wanting, 3 years of waiting, and now this, now him, looking at her like she was something precious and terrifying all at once. She walked over to Ryan. I'm sorry. He looked past her at Victor, then back to her face, and understanding dawned. Yeah, I figured. You're a good man, Ryan. Just not the right one. He smiled, but it was sad. It's okay, Elena. I knew it was a long shot. He's a lucky bastard. Hope he realizes that. I don't think anything's going to happen. I think he's just jealous, possessive, finally realizing what he's been too stupid to see. Ryan shook his head. Talk to him. Actually talk to him. Make him say it out loud. Because Victor's great at a lot of things. But dealing with emotions isn't one of them. Don't let him hide behind his walls. Elena nodded, not trusting her voice. Ryan gave her hand a quick squeeze, then got in his car and drove away, leaving her alone on the sidewalk with the man who'd just turned her entire world sideways. Victor was already holding open the passenger door of his Aston Martin. Elena slid in without a word, the leather seats cool against her legs. Victor got in the driver's side, started the engine. It purred to life like a dangerous animal, and pulled into traffic. They drove in silence for 5 minutes. 10. Elena watched the city lights blur past, her mind spinning. She should say something, should demand answers, should make him explain what the hell just happened. But she was afraid that if she pushed, he'd retreat, afraid that whatever had cracked open tonight would seal shut, and she'd never get another chance. I followed you. Victor's voice cut through the silence. From the restaurant. I was there before you arrived, watched you eat. Watched him make you laugh. Watched you look at him like... He trailed off. Like what? Like you wanted to want him. Elena's breath caught. How did you... I know you, Elena. Better than you think. I know you look out your window at night watching my study. I know you rearrange the books I leave out because you figured out which ones I'm reading. I know you leave my coffee exactly 3 minutes before I come downstairs because you've timed how long it takes me to get ready in the morning. I know you, and watching you try to force yourself to feel something for Ryan was... His hands tightened on the steering wheel. Unbearable. You don't get to be jealous, Elena said, and she was proud of how steady her voice was. You don't get to push me away for 3 years and then be upset when I try to move on. I know. Then why are you? Victor didn't answer until they'd pulled through the gates of the estate, past security, up the long drive. He parked in front of the mansion, killed the engine, but didn't move to get out. Because I'm selfish, he said finally. Because I'm weak. Because every rule I've made for myself, every line I've drawn, every wall I've built, you make me want to break them all. Elena turned in her seat to look at him. In the dim light from the dashboard, his face was all sharp angles and shadows. I don't want to break you, Victor. I never wanted that. I know. That's the problem. You never asked for any of this, never pushed, just existed in my space, making everything better, and I was supposed to be strong enough to resist that, supposed to be disciplined enough to maintain the distance. He finally looked at her, and his eyes were full of things she'd never seen there before. I'm not strong enough, Elena, not when it comes to you. What are you saying? I'm saying I want you, have wanted you since the day you walked into my house. I'm saying I think about you every morning when I come downstairs, and you've already made everything perfect. I'm saying I work late in my study because if I don't, I'll end up at your door. I'm saying that when I saw Ryan's hand on your back tonight, I wanted to break every bone in his body, and that scared me more than anything has scared me in years. Elena couldn't breathe, couldn't think, could only stare at this man who never cracked, who never showed weakness as he laid himself open. I'm also saying I can't offer you anything good. My life is dangerous. The people I deal with are dangerous. Anyone close to me becomes a target, and you're already too close. You already matter too much. If something happened to you because of me, his voice broke, actually broke. I couldn't survive that. So what? Elena's own voice was shaking now. You're just going to keep pushing me away? Keep pretending you don't feel this? I don't know. I don't have an answer. All I know is I can't watch you with someone else. That's not fair. Nothing about this is fair. Victor's hand moved, almost unconsciously, reaching for her face again. His thumb brushed her cheekbone, and Elena closed her eyes against the gentleness of it. But here we are. Here we are, she repeated. They sat there, frozen in that moment, neither of them willing to cross the final line. Victor's hand on her face, Elena's heart hammering, the air between them charged with 3 years of denied want. Then Elena did what she'd wanted to do for so long. She kissed him. It wasn't planned, wasn't thought through. She just leaned across the console and pressed her lips to his. And for one perfect second, Victor went absolutely still, like he was too shocked to react. Then he kissed her back. And it was nothing like Elena had imagined. It wasn't gentle or sweet or careful. It was desperate and fierce and tasted like 3 years of want finally breaking free. Victor's hand slid into her hair, angling her head, deepening the kiss, and Elena made a sound she didn't recognize as coming from herself. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Victor pressed his forehead to hers. "This is a mistake," he whispered. "Probably. I'll ruin you. Maybe." Elena said, "Stop talking." She kissed him again, softer this time. "For once in your life, stop thinking and just feel." Victor's control shattered. He pulled her closer, as close as the car would allow, and kissed her like a drowning man finding air. Like 3 years of discipline had finally run out, like he was done fighting. When they finally stumbled out of the car and into the house, neither of them were thinking about consequences or complications or rules. They were just two people who'd denied themselves too long, finally giving in to the inevitable. The mansion was dark and quiet around them as Victor led Elena up the main staircase, not to her room in the staff wing, but to his private quarters, a place she'd never been, a place no one went. "Victor," she said as he opened the door, "if you want to stop, tell me now." His voice was rough. "Because once we cross this line, I don't know if I can go back." Elena looked up at him, at this powerful, dangerous, controlled man who was looking at her like she was the only thing in the world that mattered. "I don't want to go back," she said, and crossed the threshold into his world. Victor's bedroom was nothing like Elena expected. She'd imagined something cold, minimalist, all sharp edges and control. Instead, it was warm, dark wood furniture, deep blue walls, a massive bed with sheets that looked soft enough to drown in, books everywhere, a telescope by the window, signs of an actual human life lived in private, away from the mask he showed the world. "You're staring," Victor said, his voice low behind her. Elena turned to face him. He'd shrugged off his jacket, loosened his collar, and the sight of him slightly undone did something to her pulse. "I've never been in here before." No one has. Not in years. Why me? Why now? Victor crossed the space between them slowly, deliberately, like he was giving her time to change her mind. When he reached her, his hand settled on her waist, careful, almost tentative. Because I'm tired of pretending. Tired of lying to myself about what I want. And what do you want? His gray eyes held hers, and there was no mask now. No control. Just naked honesty that made her breath catch. You. In every way I shouldn't. Elena's hands found his chest, feeling his heartbeat through the expensive fabric. Then take what you want. Elena. Her name was a warning. If we do this, everything changes. You understand that? I've been waiting 3 years for everything to change. Something broke in his expression. He kissed her again, slower this time, but no less intense, his hand sliding up her back, finding the zipper of her dress. The sound of it lowering seemed loud in the quiet room, but Elena didn't care. She'd crossed the threshold. There was no going back now, and she didn't want to. The dress pooled at her feet. Victor's hands traced her skin like he was memorizing it, and Elena shivered despite the warmth. She reached for his shirt buttons, fumbling slightly in her eagerness, and felt him smile against her mouth. Nervous? He murmured. Terrified. Good. So am I. That admission that Victor Hale, who feared nothing, was scared of this, somehow made everything easier. Elena managed to get his shirt open, her hands spreading across his chest, feeling muscle and warmth and scars she wanted to know the stories behind. They made it to the bed in a tangle of limbs and shed clothing, and when Victor settled over her, his weight pressing her into the mattress, Elena felt like she'd finally come home. He took his time, learning her, finding what made her gasp, what made her arch against him. It was intense and consuming and nothing like the cold, controlled man she thought she knew. Afterward, they lay tangled together, breathing hard, neither of them quite able to form words. Elena's head was on Victor's chest, listening to his heart slowly return to normal, and his hand was in her hair, gentle in a way that made her throat tight. Stay, he said finally. Don't go back to your room. Elena propped herself up to look at him. His hair was messed up, his face softer than she'd ever seen it, and the vulnerability in his eyes made her chest ache. Okay. Just like that? What did you expect? An argument? From you? Always. But he was almost smiling, and it transformed his whole face. Elena realized she'd never really seen him smile before. Not like this. Not real. She settled back against him, her fingers tracing idle patterns on his skin. What happens now? Victor's hand stilled in her hair. I don't know. This wasn't supposed to happen. Regrets already? No, but complications, yes. He was quiet for a moment, and Elena could practically hear him thinking. My enemies will see you as a weakness. A target. I've been living in your house for 3 years. They already know I exist. As staff. As someone disposable. This is different. If they know you matter to me. Do I? Elena interrupted. Matter to you? Victor's arm tightened around her. You know you do. I wouldn't have lost my mind tonight if you didn't. Say it anyway. Elena, you told me to stop thinking and feel. Now I'm asking you to do the same. Say it. She felt him tense, felt him fighting it, even now, even after everything. But then he shifted, turning so they were face to face in the dim light from the window, and his hand cupped her jaw. You matter, he said roughly. You matter more than anyone has in longer than I can remember. You matter so much it scares the hell out of me. Is that what you wanted to hear? Yes. Elena kissed him softly. Was that so hard? You have no idea. They fell asleep like that, wrapped around each other, and for the first time in 3 years, Elena didn't lie awake wishing for something she couldn't have. She had it. He was right here, solid and warm beneath her hands, his breathing evening out as he drifted off. She should have been happy, should have been content, but a small voice in the back of her mind whispered that this was too easy, that Victor's fears weren't unfounded, that crossing this line had consequences neither of them had fully thought through. Elena pushed the voice away and closed her eyes. She woke to sunlight streaming through unfamiliar windows and Victor's side of the bed empty. Panic flared for a moment. Had he left? Changed his mind? Retreated back behind his walls? But then she heard water running. The shower. Elena sat up, pulling the sheet around herself, taking in the room by daylight. It really was lived in. A half-read book on the nightstand. Clothes draped over a chair like he'd been too tired to put them away properly. A framed photograph on the dresser. Victor with a woman and a young boy, all of them smiling. Family, Elena guessed. People she'd never heard him mention. The shower cut off. A few minutes later, Victor emerged in just a towel, water still beading on his shoulders, and stopped when he saw her awake. "Morning," Elena said, suddenly shy. "Morning." He crossed to the dresser, started pulling out clothes. "I have meetings today. 3 of them. Should be back by evening." Elena watched him, trying to read his tone. He sounded, normal, professional. Like they were back to employer and employee, like last night hadn't happened. "Victor." He paused, shirt in hand. "Are we going to talk about this?" "What's there to talk about?" "Everything. Last night. What it means. Where we go from here." Victor pulled on the shirt, started buttoning it with precise movements. "We go forward. Carefully. No one can know about this yet. Not the staff, not my people. It's safer that way." Elena felt something cold settle in her stomach. "So we hide. We're smart. There's a difference." "Is there?" Victor's jaw tightened. He finished with the buttons, reached for pants. "Elena, you said you understood the complications." "I do. But I didn't think the first thing you'd do in the morning was pretend nothing changed." "I'm not pretending. I'm being practical. My world doesn't come with the luxury of public relationships and normal dating. Everything is a calculation. Everything is risk versus reward." "And what am I? A risk or a reward?" The question hung between them. Victor finished dressing, and when he finally looked at her, his face was carefully blank. "Both, which is why we need to be careful." Elena clutched the sheet tighter. "You said everything would change." "It has, just not in ways anyone else can see yet." He crossed to the bed, sat on the edge, his hand finding hers. "I meant what I said last night, all of it. But showing the world that you matter to me puts you in danger. Immediate, real danger. So until I figure out how to protect you properly, we keep this between us. Understand?" She did understand. Hated it, but understood. "How long?" "I don't know. Weeks. Maybe longer. I need to shore up some alliances, make sure my enemies don't see an opening." His thumb stroked over her knuckles. "I know it's not what you want to hear. What I want is for you to not look at me like I'm a problem you need to solve." Victor's expression softened fractionally. "You're not a problem. You're the only good thing I've let into my life in years, and I'm trying not to get you killed because of it." Put like that, it was hard to argue. Elena sighed, leaning her forehead against his shoulder. "This is complicated." "Yes." "I hate it." "I know." Victor's hand slid into her hair, familiar now in a way that made her ache. "But I'm not letting you go. We'll figure it out." "Promise?" "I don't make promises I can't keep." That was both reassuring and terrifying. Elena pulled back to look at him. "So what do we do today? Pretend last night didn't happen?" "No, we just don't advertise it. You go back to managing the house. I go to my meetings. Tonight you come back here. And we continue figuring this out." He kissed her forehead. "I'm not good at this, Elena. Relationships, feelings. I'm going to mess it up. Probably. You're very honest this morning. Someone has to be." Victor almost smiled again. Almost. Then he stood, checking his watch, the mask sliding back into place. "I need to go. Stay as long as you want. Help yourself to anything." He was halfway to the door when Elena called after him. "Victor?" He turned. "Thank you. For last night. For telling me the truth." Something flickered in his expression. "I should have told you years ago." Then he was gone, and Elena was alone in his room, surrounded by evidence of the private life he kept hidden from everyone. She should get up, should shower and dress and go back to her own room before the staff started arriving and asking questions. Should slip back into her role as the efficient house manager who kept everything running smoothly. Instead, she lay back down in his bed, breathing in the scent of him still clinging to the sheets, and tried not to think about how quickly everything had shifted. How precarious this new thing between them was. How one wrong move could shatter it all. By the time Elena made it back to her own room, it was almost 9. Late for her. The house was waking up. She could hear voices downstairs, the sounds of the day staff arriving. She showered quickly, dressed in her usual professional clothes, pulled her hair back into its customary neat style. When she looked in the mirror, she expected to see something different, some visible mark of what had happened. But she looked the same. Just Elena. Just the house manager. Except everything had changed. Maria found her in the kitchen an hour later, reviewing the week's meal plans like nothing was different. "You're in late," Maria observed, not looking up from the vegetables she was chopping. "Couldn't sleep. Stayed up reading." "Mm-hmm." Maria's tone suggested she didn't believe that for a second. "How was dinner with Ryan?" Elena's stomach twisted. She'd almost forgotten about Ryan, about how last night was supposed to go. "It was fine. Nice." "Just nice?" "Maria, I'm just asking." The older woman finally looked up, her eyes sharp. "You came in late. You look tired. Something happened." "Nothing happened." "Mija, I've worked in this house a long time. I know when people are lying." Elena set down her clipboard. "Even if something did happen, I couldn't talk about it. Because it involves him." Not a question. Maria shook her head, going back to her chopping. "Be careful, Elena. Men like Victor Hale, they don't know how to love without destroying. You don't know him. I know enough. I've seen what this life does to people. The violence, the secrets, the constant looking over your shoulder. That's what you're signing up for if you get involved with him." "I didn't ask for advice." "No, but I'm giving it anyway because I care about you." Maria's knife stilled. "You're a good girl, smart. You deserve someone who can give you a normal life, not this." Elena wanted to argue, wanted to defend Victor, to explain that underneath all the control and danger was someone capable of tenderness, of fear, of feeling. But Maria wouldn't understand. Hell, Elena barely understood it herself. "I'll be careful," she said finally. "That's all I can ask." The rest of the day passed in a blur of normalcy that felt surreal. Elena handled deliveries, coordinated with the landscaping crew, resolved a scheduling conflict between 2 housekeepers. She answered 3 calls for Victor, took messages, managed his calendar like she always did. Professional, efficient, invisible. But every time she passed his study, her pulse jumped. Every time she heard his name, something in her chest tightened. She kept replaying last night, his hands on her skin, his voice rough with want, the way he'd looked at her like she was the only thing that mattered. Then his face this morning. Careful. Controlled. Already retreating into practicality. Around 3, her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Don't use your regular phone for us. This one's secure. Delete after reading." V. Elena stared at the message, something cold sliding down her spine. This was real. This was Victor's world, burner phones and security protocols and constant paranoia. She deleted the text, saved the number under a fake name, and tried not to think about what it meant that their relationship required this level of secrecy. Another text came through an hour later. "Meeting's running late. Don't wait up. So much for tonight." Elena tried not to feel disappointed. Tried to remember that Victor's life didn't revolve around her, that he had an entire criminal empire to manage, that she'd known what she was getting into. Except she hadn't. Not really. Last night had felt like the beginning of something. This morning had felt like a retreat, and now he was canceling on her via encrypted text. She was spiraling. Elena recognized the feeling, tried to talk herself down. This was day 1. Of course there would be adjustments. Of course it wouldn't be smooth. She just needed to be patient. Ryan found her in her office that evening, and the sight of him made guilt crash over her in waves. "Hey," he said, leaning against her doorframe. "Got a minute?" "Of course. Come in." He shut the door behind him, which immediately made the small space feel smaller. "I wanted to check on you after last night." "I'm fine." "Elena." Ryan's voice was gentle but firm. "I saw Victor. I saw how you looked at him. So I'm asking again, are you fine?" Elena's defenses crumbled. "I don't know. Maybe. It's complicated. With Victor, everything's complicated." Ryan sat in the chair across from her desk. "Did you talk to him?" "Yes, and he told me all the reasons why this is a terrible idea and why we need to keep it secret. and why I'm basically a walking target now. But the words came out more bitter than she intended. He's not wrong. I know. That's what makes it worse. He's trying to protect me, and I'm sitting here feeling like he's ashamed of me. He's not ashamed. He's scared. Ryan leaned forward, elbows on his knees. Elena, I've known Victor for 8 years. I've seen him stare down people twice his size without flinching. I've seen him make decisions that would destroy most people and not lose a minute of sleep. But you? You make him scared. That's how much you matter. Then why does it feel like he's already pulling away? Because that's what he does when he cares. He calculates, he plans. He tries to control every variable to make sure nothing goes wrong. Ryan's expression was understanding. Give him time to figure out how to do this. He's never had to before. Elena wanted to believe that, wanted to trust that Victor's distance was protective, not dismissive. But 3 years of watching him maintain perfect control made it hard to believe he'd suddenly let those walls down completely. What if he never figures it out? She asked quietly. What if he just keeps me hidden forever? Then you walk away. You deserve better than being someone's secret. Ryan stood, moved toward the door. But give him a chance first, real chance. Victor's not good at this, but I think he wants to be. For you. After Ryan left, Elena sat in her office until the house went quiet around her. The day staff left. The security team changed shifts. The mansion settled into its nighttime stillness, and still Victor didn't come home. Elena told herself she wasn't waiting for him, told herself she had work to do, emails to answer, schedules to finalize. But her eyes kept drifting to her phone, to the secure number, wondering if he'd text again. He didn't. By midnight, Elena gave up and went to bed. Not his bed. That felt presumptuous now, without an invitation. Her own bed in the staff wing, where she belonged, where she'd slept for 3 years before last night had turned her world sideways. She didn't sleep well. Kept waking up, checking her phone, finding nothing. By dawn, she felt hollowed out and stupid. This was what Maria had warned her about. This was what she'd signed up for. Victor's world didn't run on normal schedules or normal relationship rules. She should have known better. Elena was in the kitchen by 6, making coffee with movements sharp enough to make Maria raise an eyebrow when she arrived at 7. Rough night? Couldn't sleep? Maria started pulling out ingredients for breakfast. He come home? Elena didn't bother asking who he was. I don't know. I wasn't keeping track. Liar. Fine. Yes. I was keeping track. No, he didn't come home. Or if he did, he didn't bother to tell me. Elena slammed a cabinet harder than necessary. And before you say, I told you so, I wasn't going to. Maria's voice was surprisingly gentle. I was going to say that men like him, powerful men, they don't know how to be vulnerable. Every relationship is a chess game. Every emotion is a weakness. He's probably trying to figure out how to care about you without it destroying everything he's built. And what am I supposed to do in the meantime? Just wait around hoping he'll figure it out? That's up to you, mija. But if you're going to be with someone like Victor Hale, you better get used to the waiting, to the secrets, to the fact that his world doesn't operate on normal rules. Maria paused in her chopping. Question is, are you strong enough for that? Elena didn't have an answer. Victor came home at 8 in the morning, looking like he hadn't slept. Elena saw him from the second-floor hallway, crossing through the foyer toward his study, and something in her chest twisted painfully. She should let it go, should give him space, should be the understanding, patient woman who accepted the complications of his life. Instead, she followed him. Victor was pouring a drink, bourbon, at 8 in the morning, which said everything about how his night had gone, when Elena walked into his study without knocking. He turned, surprise flickering across his face before the mask slammed down. Elena, you didn't come home last night. I texted you. You said you'd be late, not that you'd be gone all night. Victor's jaw tightened. I don't answer to you. The words hit like a slap. Elena felt her spine straighten, her chin lift. You're right, you don't. Because what are we, exactly? I'm still just your house manager, aren't I? Last night was just, what? A mistake? An itch you needed to scratch? Don't. Victor set down his glass hard enough to make the crystal ring. Don't do that. Do what? Ask for basic communication? Expect you to treat me like I matter? You do matter. You think I'd have spent all night in meetings with people I hate, securing alliances and calling in favors if you didn't? You think I'd be restructuring my entire security protocol to protect you if you were just an itch? That stopped Elena cold. What? Victor dragged a hand through his hair, and she realized he really did look exhausted. Worn. That's where I was. That's why I didn't come home. I was making sure that when people find out about us, and they will, you're as safe as I can make you. You could have told me that. I just did. No, you could have told me last night, via text, via anything other than silence. Elena crossed her arms. You can't just disappear and expect me to understand. That's not how this works. Then tell me how it works, because I have no idea. Victor's voice rose slightly, control slipping. I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to care about someone and keep them safe and run my life and not screw it all up. So forgive me if I'm not perfect at navigating a relationship I never wanted to have. Never wanted? Elena's voice went quiet. Dangerous. Is that how you feel? Victor closed his eyes. That came out wrong. Did it? Yes. He opened his eyes, and they were full of frustration and exhaustion and something that might have been fear. I never wanted this because wanting things makes you weak, makes you vulnerable, makes you human. And I can't afford to be human, Elena. Not in my world. But you made me want it anyway, and now I'm trying to figure out how to be what you need while also being what my empire needs, and I'm failing at both. The anger drained out of Elena, replaced by something softer, sadder. She crossed the study, stopped in front of him, close enough to touch, but not touching. I don't need you to be perfect. I just need you to talk to me, to let me in, to stop treating this like another problem you have to solve alone. I've been alone a long time. It's habit. Then break the habit. Victor's hand came up, cupping her face with a gentleness that contrasted sharply with the tension in his body. You make it sound simple. It is simple. You just make it complicated. Elena. Her name was rough. I'm trying. I know it doesn't look like it, but I am. Try harder. She leaned into his touch. Or let me go. But don't keep me in this limbo where I don't know if I'm your secret or your partner. Partner. The word seemed to surprise him as much as it surprised her. I've never had a partner before. Then we'll figure it out together. But you have to let me in, Victor. Really in. Not just physically, but all of it. The meetings, the danger, the decisions. If I'm going to be with you, I need to be with you. Victor pulled her closer, his forehead resting against hers. What if something happens to you? Then something happens. But at least I'll have chosen it. Chosen you. Chosen this. Elena's hands found his chest, feeling his heart racing beneath her palms. I'm not fragile and I'm not stupid. I know what your world is. I'm choosing it anyway. You're insane. Probably. But so are you for keeping this going. Victor kissed her then, and it was different from last night. Less desperate, more certain. Like he was making a decision, committing to something he'd been fighting. When they broke apart, he kept her close. I have another meeting in an hour. Then I'm done for the day. Come to my room tonight. We'll talk. Really talk. Promise? I don't make promises I can't keep. You said that yesterday. Then believe me when I make them. Victor's thumb brushed her lower lip. Tonight, we'll figure this out. Elena nodded, and when she left his study, something felt different. Still complicated, still messy, but different. Like maybe they'd turned a corner. Like maybe this could actually work. She was halfway down the hall when she ran into Marcus Chen, Victor's head of security. Tall, built like a wall, expression always unreadable. He'd been with Victor longer than anyone. Was probably the closest thing Victor had to a friend. Miss Cross, he said, nodding at her. Marcus. He studied her for a moment, something calculating in his dark eyes. Victor's been on edge lately. Elena's stomach tightened. Has he? Distracted, making decisions that don't make tactical sense, restructuring security protocols without explanation. Marcus's gaze sharpened. You wouldn't know anything about that, would you? I'm just the house manager. You're not just anything. And if you're important enough to make Victor Hale lose his focus, you're important enough to be a target. It wasn't a threat, just a statement of fact. Watch yourself, Miss Cross. Victor's enemies are always looking for weak spots. He walked away before Elena could respond, leaving her standing in the hallway with ice in her veins. This was it. This was the reality Maria had warned her about, that Ryan had tried to explain, that Victor kept insisting she understand. She wasn't just dating a dangerous man. She was becoming a liability in a world where liabilities didn't tend to survive long. Elena made it to her office on shaking legs and sat down hard in her chair. What had she done? What had they done? Last night had felt inevitable, necessary, right. This morning felt like standing on the edge of a cliff, looking down at a drop that might kill her. But when she thought about walking away, about going back to the way things were, her chest physically hurt. 3 years of wanting, of waiting, and now that she finally had him, messy and complicated and dangerous as it was, she couldn't imagine giving it up. So she wouldn't. Elena pulled out her phone, the secure one, and typed a message. I talked to Marcus. He knows something's different. The response came fast. He knows because I told him. Easier to protect you if my people know to watch out for you. You could have warned me. Would you have preferred to be blindsided when the rest of them figure it out? Fair point. Elena typed. How many people know? Marcus. Ryan. That's it for now. But it won't stay contained forever. Someone will notice. Someone always does. Then what happens? The pause was longer this time. Then we deal with it. Together. Elena stared at that last word. Together. Victor Hale, who did everything alone, was offering partnership. It shouldn't have meant as much as it did, but after this morning, after last night, after 3 years of distance, it meant everything. Tonight, she typed. You promised we'd talk. I did. I'll keep it. Elena put the phone away and tried to focus on work, but her mind kept drifting to tonight, to whatever conversation waited, to the feeling that they were standing at a crossroads, and whatever direction they chose would change everything. She just hoped they'd be strong enough to survive it. The day crawled. Every hour felt like 3, and Elena found herself checking the clock obsessively, watching minutes tick by with agonizing slowness. She tried to lose herself in work, inventory lists, staff schedules, coordinating with vendors, but her mind kept circling back to tonight, to Victor's promise, to the conversation that felt like it might determine everything. Around 2 in the afternoon, something shifted in the house. Elena felt it before she understood it. A tension in the air, security moving with more purpose, voices lowered in hallways. She was in the main foyer when Marcus appeared, his expression grim. We have a situation, he said without preamble. Victor needs you to stay in your quarters until further notice. Elena's stomach dropped. What kind of situation? The kind where you don't ask questions and do what you're told. Marcus's tone was sharp, professional. Now, Miss Cross. She wanted to argue, wanted to demand answers, but the look on Marcus's face stopped her cold. This wasn't about control or secrecy. This was about danger, real danger. Elena went to her room, her heart hammering. She'd barely shut the door when her phone buzzed, the secure one. Stay where you are. Lock the door. Don't come out until I tell you it's safe. V. What's happening? Something I'm handling. Just stay put. That was all she got. No explanation, no reassurance. Just an order and silence. Elena locked her door and sat on her bed, every muscle tense, straining to hear anything from the rest of the house. But the staff wing was isolated, designed that way on purpose. She could be in the middle of a war zone and never hear a thing. An hour passed, then 2. Her phone stayed silent. Elena paced her small room, anxiety eating at her from the inside. This was Victor's world. This was what she'd signed up for. But knowing it intellectually was different from living it, from sitting in forced ignorance while something dangerous unfolded floors away. Finally, after what felt like a lifetime, her phone buzzed again. All clear. Come to my study. Elena didn't waste time. She unlocked her door and practically ran through the house, her heels echoing on marble. The mansion felt different now, emptier somehow, like the walls themselves were holding their breath. Victor's study door was open. Elena stepped inside and found him standing at his desk, Marcus beside him, both men looking like they'd aged years in the past few hours. There was blood on Victor's knuckles. What happened? Elena's voice came out steadier than she felt. Victor looked up, and the relief that flashed across his face was quickly buried. Nothing you need to worry about. Don't. She crossed to him, reaching for his injured hand. Don't shut me out. Not after this morning. Marcus cleared his throat. I'll give you 2 a minute. He left, closing the door behind him. Victor let Elena examine his hand, her fingers gentle on the split skin. It's not as bad as it looks. That's not the point. What happened? A message. From someone who thought they could pressure me into a bad deal by making threats. Victor's voice was flat, controlled. I delivered a counter-message. With your fists. With clarity. He pulled his hand back, wincing slightly. The situation is resolved. Elena studied his face, seeing the tension lines around his eyes, the tightness in his jaw. Was it about me? Victor's silence was answer enough. They know, Elena said quietly. Someone found out about us and tried to use it. They suspected. They don't know anything concrete yet. But yes, someone decided you might be leverage. Victor's gray eyes met hers. I made it very clear what happens to people who come near you. Victor, no, listen to me. He gripped her shoulders, his touch firm but not harsh. This is what I was afraid of. This is why I wanted to wait, to be careful. Because the second my enemies see a weakness, they exploit it. And you, his voice cracked slightly. You're the biggest weakness I've ever had. Elena's chest ached. I'm sorry. Don't apologize. This isn't your fault. It's mine for not protecting you better from the start. You can't protect me from everything. That's not how this works. Then how does it work? Victor's hands dropped. Because I don't know how to do this, Elena. I don't know how to care about someone and keep them safe in this life. Every relationship I've ever had ended in blood. My wife... He stopped abruptly. Elena went very still. Your wife? Victor turned away, moving to the window, his back to her. When he spoke, his voice was distant. I was married once. A long time ago. Before all this. She was good and kind and everything I wasn't. She thought she could handle my world. She was wrong. What happened? What always happens. My enemies found her, used her to get to me. By the time I got there, it was too late. Victor's shoulders were rigid. She died because she loved me, because I was arrogant enough to think I could keep her separate from the violence. I learned that day that there is no separation. Anyone I care about becomes a target. That's why I stopped caring. The confession hit Elena like a physical blow. She'd known Victor had walls, had assumed they came from his work, from years of operating in darkness. She hadn't known they'd been built on a grave. I'm not her, Elena said quietly. I know that. Do you? Because it sounds like you're treating me like I'm made of glass. She crossed to him, forcing him to look at her. I'm not fragile. I'm not naive. I know your world is dangerous. I'm choosing it anyway. Why? Victor's voice was raw. Why would you choose this? Choose me. Because for 3 years, I've watched you, really watched you. And yes, you're cold and controlled and probably more damaged than I can comprehend. But you're also brilliant and loyal and capable of tenderness when you let yourself be. You're not just the mask you show everyone else. There's more underneath. And that's what I want. That's what I've always wanted. Victor's hand came up to cup her face, his thumb tracing her cheekbone. You're going to get hurt. Probably. But I'd rather get hurt with you than be safe without you. That's insane. You keep saying that. Elena covered his hand with hers. Maybe we're both insane. Victor pulled her closer, resting his forehead against hers. I can't lose you, not like I lost her. You won't. You can't promise that. Neither can you. But we can try. Elena's hands found his chest, feeling his heart racing. That's all anyone can do. Try. They stood like that for a long moment, breathing together, finding equilibrium in the chaos. Finally, Victor pulled back slightly. I need to clean this up, he said, gesturing to his bloodied knuckles. And we need to talk, really talk, about what happens next. Okay. They went to his private bathroom, attached to his bedroom, which felt oddly domestic given everything else. and Elena watched as Victor ran water over his hand. The cuts weren't deep, more impact damage than anything serious. She found bandages in a cabinet that probably held more medical supplies than most emergency rooms. "You do this a lot," she observed, wrapping his knuckles with practiced efficiency that surprised her. "More than I should, less than I used to." Victor flexed his hand, testing the bandaging. "I used to handle everything myself, got my hands dirty constantly. Now I have people for that. But sometimes," he trailed off, "sometimes you need to make a point personally." "Yes." Elena finished with the bandaging and didn't let go of his hand. "The person who threatened me. What happened to them?" "They won't be threatening anyone again." The flatness of his tone told Elena everything she needed to know. She should have been horrified, should have been repulsed by the casual violence. Instead, she felt something darker. Relief. Safety. The knowledge that Victor would burn the world down before he let anyone hurt her. "Does that make me a bad person?" she asked. "That I'm not upset about that?" "It makes you honest." Victor's free hand tilted her chin up. "This is my world, Elena. Violence is currency. Fear is leverage. I've accepted that. But you still have a choice. You can still walk away. I don't want to walk away. Even after today? Even knowing this is just the beginning?" Elena thought about it, really thought about it. About the fear she'd felt sitting in her room, not knowing what was happening. About the blood on his knuckles. About Marcus's warning and Maria's concerns, and the reality that being with Victor meant living with constant danger. And then she thought about the alternative, going back to the way things were, maintaining the distance, watching Victor exist behind his walls while she went through the motions of a life that felt hollow. "Even after today," she said firmly. Victor searched her face, looking for doubt, for hesitation. Whatever he saw there must have satisfied him because he kissed her, deep and claiming, and Elena felt something in her chest settle. They'd survive this. Somehow, they'd make it work. When they finally made it back to his bedroom, the sun was setting, painting the room in shades of amber and gold. Victor shed his blood-stained shirt, and Elena saw the scars properly for the first time. Bullet wounds, knife marks. The physical evidence of a life lived in violence. She traced one scar with her fingertip, a puckered mark near his shoulder. "How old were you?" 23. Bar fight that went wrong. Victor caught her hand. "You don't want to know the stories." "I do, actually. I want to know all of it. The good, the bad, the parts you keep hidden." "Why?" "Because you're asking me to be part of your life. I can't do that halfway. I need to know who you really are, not just the version you show everyone else." Victor was quiet for a long moment. Then he sat on the edge of his bed, pulling her down beside him. "Where do you want me to start?" "The beginning. Your wife. Your family. How you became this." Elena gestured vaguely at him, at the room, at the empire beyond the walls. So he told her. Not everything. That would have taken days. But enough. About growing up poor in a neighborhood where survival meant fighting. About his mother, who'd worked 3 jobs and still couldn't keep them fed. About the older brother who'd gotten involved with the wrong people and dragged Victor in after him. About meeting Sarah, his wife, when he was 25 and stupid enough to think love could save him. About marrying her in a courthouse ceremony with no guests because his life was already too dangerous for witnesses. About 3 years of trying to build something normal while drowning in a world that didn't allow for normal. And about the night it all ended. Coming home to find their small apartment destroyed. Finding Sarah in the bedroom, beaten beyond recognition, left as a message from a rival who thought Victor was getting too powerful, too ambitious. "I held her while she died," Victor said, his voice hollow. "She looked at me and said she didn't regret it. Didn't regret choosing me. But I regretted it. Regretted every second I'd let her into my life, every moment I'd been selfish enough to think I could have her in this world both." Elena's throat was tight. "I'm sorry. I'm not telling you this for sympathy. I'm telling you so you understand what you're signing up for. After Sarah died, I made a decision. No more relationships. No more caring. I'd build my empire and I'd do it alone, because alone meant no vulnerabilities. Alone meant no one else would die because of me. And that worked for 15 years. Until you." Victor looked at her, and his eyes were bleak. "I didn't want to care about you. Fought it every day for 3 years. But you were there, in my house, in my space, making everything easier and better, and I couldn't maintain the distance. So you tried to scare me off. Multiple times. Stayed cold, stayed distant, hoped you'd quit, find something better. But you didn't. You just kept being there, kept being competent and calm, and somehow seen through all my bullshit. And now we're here. Elena took his unbandaged hand, threading their fingers together. Do you regret it? Last night? This? I should. Every logical part of me says this is a mistake. Victor squeezed her hand. But no, I don't regret it. I'm terrified, but I don't regret it. Good, because I don't either. They sat in the fading light, connected by their joined hands, and the confessions hanging between them. Finally, Victor spoke again. We need ground rules for this to work. Okay. You do what Marcus says, always. No arguments. If he tells you to go somewhere, you go. If he tells you to stay put, you stay. His job is to keep you alive, and he's very good at his job. Elena nodded. What else? The secure phone. Use it for anything related to us. Your regular phone is compromised. Assume everything on it is being monitored. By who? Everyone. My people, to keep you safe. My enemies, to find weaknesses. The feds, because they're always watching. Victor's expression was grim. Privacy is a luxury we don't get. Anything else? Learn to shoot. Marcus will teach you. I want you armed and trained within 2 weeks. That one surprised her. You want me to carry a gun? I want you to be able to protect yourself when I'm not around. This afternoon could have gone very differently. If they'd gotten into the house, if they'd reached you before we stopped them. Victor's jaw clenched. I need to know you can defend yourself. Elena thought about that. About the weight of a weapon in her hand. About the responsibility of being armed. But Victor was right. Today had been a warning. Next time might be worse. Okay, she agreed. I'll learn. And one more thing. Victor turned to face her fully. If this gets too heavy, if you can't handle it, if you're scared, if you want out, you tell me. No judgment, no anger. You just tell me, and I'll make sure you're set up somewhere safe with enough money to start over. I'm not going to want out. You don't know that. This was day 2, Elena. Day 2, and someone already tried to use you against me. It's only going to get worse before it gets better. Then we'll handle worse. Elena cupped his face, forcing him to meet her eyes. I'm not Sarah. I'm not going into this blind. I know exactly what I'm choosing, so stop trying to give me an escape route. I don't want one. Victor stared at her for a long moment, and she watched something shift in his expression. The fear was still there, probably always would be, but underneath it was something else. Acceptance. Maybe even hope. You're stubborn, he said. So are you. We'll see who breaks first. This isn't a game. I know. But if I don't joke about it, I'll think too hard about the fact that someone tried to hurt me today and you responded by breaking bones. Elena tried to smile. Let me cope however I need to. Victor pulled her into his lap, holding her tight enough that breathing took effort. I'm going to mess this up, probably multiple times. I'm counting on it. Perfection is boring. You're insane. You've mentioned that. They stayed tangled together as night fell properly. Not talking anymore, just existing in the same space. Elena felt the tension slowly drain from Victor's body, felt him relax in increments, like he was learning how to let go of control. Eventually they moved properly into bed, and this time was different from the first night. Slower, less desperate. Victor took his time, learning her body with a focus that made Elena's breath catch. He was intense and present and completely there in a way she suspected he rarely was with anything. Afterward, sprawled across his chest, Elena felt something close to peace. They had a long way to go. She knew that. Knew there would be more threats, more violence, more moments of fear and doubt. But lying here, listening to Victor's heartbeat under her ear, she couldn't bring herself to regret any of it. What are you thinking? Victor asked, his hand moving lazily through her hair. That I should probably move my things into this room, since I'm apparently living here now. She felt him tense slightly. Is that what you want? Is that what you want? I asked first. Elena propped herself up to look at him. Stop deflecting. Do you want me to move in here, officially? Victor's hand came up to trace her jaw. I want you safe. I want you close. I want to know where you are every second of every day so I don't lose my mind worrying. So yes, move in here. Make this our space, not just mine. Our space, Elena repeated, testing the words. They felt good. Right. Okay? That's it? Just okay? What did you expect? An argument? From you? Always. But Victor was almost smiling, and Elena's chest felt too full. She settled back against him, her fingers tracing idle patterns on his chest. Tell me something else. Something you've never told anyone. Haven't I told you enough tonight? Never enough. I want to know everything. Victor sighed, but it wasn't annoyed. All right. I'm terrified of deep water. Can't swim. Nearly drowned when I was 8 and never learned after that. Elena blinked. That was not what she'd expected. Victor Hale, feared crime lord, is afraid of swimming pools? I said deep water. Pools are fine. Oceans, lakes, anything I can't see the bottom of. Hard pass. That's actually kind of adorable. I'm not adorable. I'm terrifying. You're both. Elena kissed his chest. Your turn. Ask me something. Why house management? You could have done anything with your degree. Why this? That was a harder question than it seemed. Elena took her time answering. Control, I think. Growing up, everything was chaos. My parents fought constantly, split when I was 12. Neither of them really knew how to be adults, so I ended up managing everything. Bills, schedules, making sure there was food. I was good at creating order out of mess. And that's what my life was when you arrived. A mess. A beautiful mess, expensive mess, but yes, a mess. You had staff, but no one was coordinating them. You had systems, but they weren't talking to each other. It was chaos held together by money and intimidation. Elena smiled against his skin. I like fixing chaos. You did more than fix it. You made it function. That's my job. It's more than a job, Elena. You made this place a home. I didn't even realize it wasn't one until you did that. The words settled warm in her chest. They lay in comfortable silence for a while, and Elena felt herself drifting, exhaustion from the day's emotional roller coaster finally catching up. Elena, Victor said quietly. Thank you for staying, for not running when you had every reason to. Thank you for letting me in, finally. She felt his chest rise and fall with a deep breath. We're going to have to tell people soon. The staff, my organization, it can't stay secret much longer. I know. There will be consequences, judgment. People will have opinions about you being with me. Let them. Elena was too tired to care about hypothetical opinions. As long as you're okay with it, nothing else matters. Victor's arms tightened around her. Get some sleep. Tomorrow we start preparing you properly. Training, security protocols, everything you need to know. Tomorrow, Elena agreed, already half asleep. She drifted off feeling safer than she had any right to, wrapped in the arms of a dangerous man in a dangerous world, and somehow completely at peace with her choices. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new threats, new complications to navigate. But tonight, they had this, each other. A beginning that felt more like a homecoming. And for now, that was enough. Morning came too fast. Elena woke to sunlight streaming through unfamiliar windows, and Victor already dressed, standing at those same windows with a phone pressed to his ear. His voice was low, clipped, all business. The softness from last night had been packed away with the darkness. She watched him for a moment, this man who'd laid himself bare hours ago and was now back in his armor. The transformation should have bothered her. Instead, it was just another piece of the puzzle she was learning to understand. Victor ended the call and turned, catching her awake. Morning. You're up early. Habit. Plus we have things to do today. He crossed to the bed, sat on the edge. His hand found her face, thumb brushing her cheekbone in a gesture that was becoming familiar. How do you feel? Surprisingly okay, considering yesterday someone tried to use me as leverage. Don't joke about that. If I don't joke, I'll think too hard about it. Elena caught his wrist, keeping his hand against her face. What things do we have to do? First, you meet with Marcus. He'll start your training, Then we need to have a conversation with the senior staff. They need to know what's happening before rumors start. Elena's stomach twisted. You want to tell them. Today. Waiting won't make it easier. And after yesterday, people are already asking questions. Better they hear it from us than through gossip. He was right, but that didn't make it less terrifying. Elena had spent 3 years being invisible, being professional, being just the house manager. Now she'd be the boss's girlfriend, the crime lord's weakness, the target. Hey, Victor's voice pulled her back. Where'd you go? Just thinking about how much everything's changed in 48 hours. Second thoughts? No, just adjusting. Elena sat up, the sheet pooling around her waist. When do I meet with Marcus? 9. That gives you an hour. Victor stood, headed toward his closet. Wear something you can move in. Jeans, comfortable shoes. He'll probably start with basics. Gun basics. Among other things, Elena showered in Victor's bathroom, borrowed one of his shirts that hung to her knees, and realized she'd need to actually move her clothes over if this was going to work. The domesticity of that thought, coordinating closet space with a crime lord, would have made her laugh if it wasn't so surreal. By the time she made it back to her room in the staff wing to change properly, Maria was in the hallway, and the look on her face said she knew exactly where Elena had spent the night. Mija, Maria said, her voice carefully neutral. We should talk. Not now. I have a meeting. With Marcus, I know. Everyone knows. Maria followed Elena into her room, closing the door behind them. The whole house is buzzing. People saw Victor yesterday, saw him bloody and angry. Then you disappeared. Now you're walking around in his clothes. Elena pulled jeans from her drawer, not meeting Maria's eyes. So they're putting it together. Are you surprised? This isn't a big staff, and most of them have worked here long enough to recognize when something changes. Maria's voice softened. I'm not judging. I'm worried. Don't be. I know what I'm doing. Do you? Because from where I'm standing, you're walking into something that could destroy you. Elena spun to face her. He's not going to destroy me. Maybe not intentionally, but his world will. It destroys everything it touches. I'm stronger than you think. I know you are. That's what scares me. Maria moved closer, her hand on Elena's shoulder. Strong people think they can survive anything, so they stay in situations that kill them slowly. Promise me you'll be careful. Promise me you won't lose yourself in trying to be what he needs. Elena wanted to argue, wanted to insist she wouldn't change, wouldn't compromise who she was. But standing there in borrowed clothes, about to learn how to shoot a gun, preparing to announce a relationship that made her a target, she couldn't make that promise. I'll try, she said instead. Maria's expression said that wasn't good enough, but she nodded anyway. That's all I can ask. Elena changed quickly, pulled her hair back, and made it to the security office at exactly 9. Marcus was waiting, along with 2 other men Elena recognized as part of Victor's inner security team. Miss Cross, Marcus said, his tone professional but not unfriendly. Ready to begin? As I'll ever be. He led her down to the basement, a level of the house Elena had rarely visited. It opened into a shooting range that clearly saw regular use. The setup was professional, soundproofed, with targets at various distances and equipment that probably cost more than her car. Victor wants you trained fast, Marcus said, pulling out a handgun that looked deadly and efficient. So we're starting with basics and accelerating from there. This is a Glock 19, 9mm, reliable, relatively easy to handle, good starter weapon. Elena stared at the gun. It was smaller than she expected, but somehow more menacing up close. Ever held a gun before? Marcus asked. No. Good. No bad habits to break. He spent the next 20 minutes going over the basics, how to hold it, how to stand, how to aim, how to breathe. His teaching style was direct, patient, completely void of judgment. When he finally let her fire her first shot, the recoil surprised her, but she hit the target. Not bad, Marcus said. Again. They spent 2 hours in that basement, and by the end, Elena's hands were sore, her ears ringing despite the protection, and she'd hit center mass on the target more times than not. Marcus seemed satisfied. We'll do this every day for the next 2 weeks, he said, cleaning the weapon with practiced ease. You'll be competent by then. Not expert, but competent enough to protect yourself if needed. Do you really think it'll come to that? Marcus looked at her directly. Yesterday, someone tried to use you against Victor. He responded with overwhelming force, which bought us time. But there are a lot of people in this city who'd love to see Victor Hale taken down, and now they know his weakness. Me. You. Marcus's expression was unreadable. So yes, I think it could come to that. I think you should be prepared for the worst while hoping for the best. Elena nodded, her throat tight. Does it ever get easier, the fear? No. You just get better at functioning through it. Marcus handed her a holster and the Glock. This is yours now. Keep it close. Practice at least 3 times a week. And if you ever need backup, you call me, day or night. Understand? Yes. Good. Now go find Victor. He's waiting in his study. Elena made it upstairs with the weight of the gun heavy at her hip, hidden under the loose shirt she'd worn. The study door was open and Victor was inside with Ryan. Both men bent over what looked like financial documents spread across the desk. Elena, Victor said, looking up. How'd it go? Marcus says I'm not hopeless. High praise from him. Victor straightened, his eyes dropping to where the gun sat concealed. Something flickered in his expression. Satisfaction, maybe, or relief. We need to talk to the staff. I've called a meeting for noon, senior people only. Maria, the head of housekeeping, the groundskeeper, and Marcus's security team. That's a lot of people. They're all trusted, all been with me for years, but they need to hear this directly. Victor's gaze held hers. You don't have to be there if you don't want to be. No, I should be. They deserve to see we're both committed to this. Ryan cleared his throat. For what it's worth, I think most of them will be supportive. Surprised, maybe, but supportive. And the ones who aren't? Elena asked. They'll keep their opinions to themselves or find employment elsewhere, Victor said flatly. This isn't a democracy. At noon, Elena found herself standing in the main dining room, a space rarely used, all dark wood and crystal chandeliers, facing 8 people who'd become her co-workers over the past 3 years. Maria was there, her expression carefully neutral. Marcus stood by the door like a sentinel. The others looked curious, confused, some clearly having already guessed what this was about. Victor stood beside Elena, not touching her, but close enough that the proximity spoke volumes. Ryan hovered near the back, moral support in human form. Thank you for coming, Victor started, his voice carrying that natural authority that made people listen. I'm going to be direct because that's how I operate. Elena and I are in a relationship. As of now, she's not just the house manager. She's my partner. This changes some things practically and security-wise, which is why you needed to know. The silence that followed was heavy. Elena watched faces process the information. Maria unsurprised but worried, the head of housekeeping shocked but trying to hide it, the groundskeeper looking like he'd rather be literally anywhere else. Does anyone have concerns? Victor asked, and it wasn't really a question so much as a dare to object. Marcus spoke first. Security protocols will need updating. Elena's now a primary protect, same level as you. That means additional personnel, modified routes, different procedures. Already in progress, Victor confirmed. The head of housekeeping, Patricia, a stern woman in her 50s, raised her hand slightly. What about her duties? Will she still be managing the household? Victor looked at Elena, deferring to her. Yes, Elena said, finding her voice. I'll still handle everything I always have. This doesn't change my job, just other aspects of my life here. Will you be moving out of the staff wing? Patricia pressed. Yes. Elena felt heat creep up her neck. I'll be relocating to Victor's quarters. Someone in the back, one of the security guys, coughed to hide what was probably a laugh. Victor's expression didn't change, but Elena felt him tense slightly beside her. Any other questions? Victor asked, his tone suggesting there better not be many. Maria spoke up. Is she safe? Really safe? Because if people know about this relationship, she's as safe as I can make her, Victor interrupted, which is safer than most people in this city. But yes, there's risk. There's always risk. That's why we're training her, why security is being upgraded, why you all need to be aware and vigilant. And if someone comes after her anyway? Maria's voice was sharp with worry. Then they'll learn very quickly why that was a mistake. Victor's voice dropped, went cold. Elena is under my protection. That's not negotiable. That's not temporary. Anyone who touches her answers to me. Make sure that's understood beyond this room. The message was clear. Elena wasn't just Victor's girlfriend, she was his declared territory, and violating that would have consequences. The meeting ended without further questions, people filing out with varying expressions. Maria caught Elena's arm on the way out. "You're really doing this," she said quietly. "I really am." "Then I'll support you, even though I think you're both crazy." Maria squeezed her arm. "But be careful, mija, please." After everyone left, it was just Elena, Victor, and Ryan in the dining room. The tension drained slowly, leaving exhaustion in its wake. "That went better than expected," Ryan observed. "Because they're all too professional to object to my face," Victor said. "But word will spread. By tonight, everyone will know. By tomorrow, people outside this house will know." "And then?" Elena asked. "Then we deal with whatever comes." Victor finally moved, his hand finding the small of Elena's back. "You okay?" "I just announced to my entire staff that I'm sleeping with my boss. So, no, not really, but I'll survive." "You did good. Held your own. I stood there and let you do most of the talking." "You stood there at all. That's what mattered." Victor's hand pressed slightly, grounding. "Come on, let's get lunch. Then you can start moving your things." The afternoon was surreal. Elena packed up 3 years of life from her small room in the staff wing, clothes, books, the few personal items she'd accumulated, and moved them into Victor's space. Their space now. He'd cleared half the closet for her, moved some of his things to make room, and watching him carefully hang her dresses next to his suits was possibly the most domestic thing Elena had ever witnessed. "You're staring again," Victor said without turning around. "You're being weirdly good at this." "At what? Sharing closet space?" "At the relationship thing. The normal couple stuff." Elena sat on the edge of the bed, watching him. "I thought you'd be terrible at it." "I might still be. Give it time." Victor finished with the dresses, turned to face her. "This is new for me. All of it. The sharing, the consideration, the not being alone. I'm figuring it out as I go." "Well, you're doing better than you think." Something crossed his face. Pleasure, maybe, or relief. He crossed to where she sat, standing between her knees, his hands on her shoulders. "Thank you." "For what?" "For being patient, for not expecting me to be something I'm not. For just being here." Elena's hands found his waist. "Where else would I be?" "Anywhere safer, anywhere saner, anywhere that wouldn't require you to carry a gun and learn to shoot. But also anywhere without you. So no thanks." Elena pulled him closer. "We're doing this, Victor. Stop second-guessing." He kissed her instead of answering, and they ended up tangled in sheets that now belonged to both of them, the afternoon sun painting patterns on skin and the world outside temporarily forgotten. Later, as evening settled in and they lay wrapped around each other, Victor's phone buzzed. He ignored it the first time. The second time. The third time he sighed and reached for it. Elena watched his face change as he read whatever message had come through. The softness vanished, replaced by something hard and cold. "What is it?" she asked. "Business. Something I need to handle." Victor sat up, already mentally somewhere else. "I have to go out. Probably be late." "How late?" "I don't know. Could be midnight. Could be dawn." He was dressing quickly, efficiently. "Marcus will be here. You'll be safe." "Victor," he paused, looked back at her. "Where are you going?" "Somewhere you don't need to know about." The words stung. After everything today, after moving in together and telling the staff and promising partnership, he was shutting her out again. "I thought we were past this," Elena said carefully. "Past what?" "The secrets. The not telling me things." Victor's jaw tightened. "Some things you're better off not knowing." "That's not your call to make." "Yes, it is. This is my world, Elena, my rules, and some things stay separate." "Like what? Where you're going, who you're meeting, what you're doing." Elena sat up, pulling the sheet around herself. "How am I supposed to be your partner if you won't let me in?" "You're in. You're more in than anyone's been in 15 years. But that doesn't mean you get every detail of every piece of business I conduct. Some things are dangerous just to know about." "So you're protecting me by lying. I'm protecting you by not making you complicit." Victor's voice rose slightly. If something goes wrong tonight, if things get messy, I need you to be able to honestly say you didn't know, that you weren't involved. That gives you deniability, that keeps you safer. Elena wanted to argue, wanted to insist she could handle it, but the look on Victor's face, hard and determined and already halfway out the door, told her this was a fight she wouldn't win. Fine, she said coldly. Go do whatever you're doing. I'll be here, safe and ignorant. Victor flinched. Elena, no, you're right. Your world, your rules. I'll just be the good girlfriend and not ask questions. Don't do that. Don't make this about me not trusting you. Then what is it about? It's about me not wanting you to carry the weight of what I do, not wanting you to have to live with the knowledge of... He stopped, dragged a hand through his hair. I do terrible things, Elena. Things I'm not proud of. Things that keep this empire running, and I don't want you looking at me differently when you know the details. The confession took the wind out of Elena's anger. She saw it then. Not control or distance, but shame. Victor was protecting himself as much as her. I already know you do terrible things, Elena said quietly. I've known for 3 years. I'm not naive about who you are. Knowing conceptually is different from knowing specifically. Maybe, but keeping me in the dark doesn't change the reality. It just means I'm worrying about worst-case scenarios instead of knowing the truth. Victor stood there, torn, and Elena could see him fighting himself. Finally, he spoke. I'm meeting with someone who's been causing problems, skimming money, making side deals, undermining my authority. This person needs to be dealt with, and the dealing won't be pleasant. His voice was flat, controlled. Is that specific enough? Elena's stomach twisted, but she kept her face neutral. Will you be safe? Yes. I'll have Ryan and 3 others with me. This is about sending a message, not about getting into a fight. Okay, then be careful and come home when you're done. Victor stared at her. That's it? No lecture about violence? No moral objections? Would they change anything? No. Then what's the point? Elena held his gaze. I don't like it, but I understand it's part of your world, our world now. I'm not going to shame you for doing what you think is necessary. Something in Victor's expression cracked. He crossed back to the bed, cupped her face in both hands, kissed her hard enough to bruise. I don't deserve you, he said roughly. Probably not, but you're stuck with me anyway. He left a few minutes later and Elena was alone in their room, still getting used to thinking of it that way, with the weight of what he'd told her settling heavy in her chest. Someone was going to get hurt tonight, maybe killed, and Victor would be the one doing it, or ordering it done, and then he'd come home and slide into bed beside her like nothing had happened. This was the reality. This was the choice she'd made. Elena got up, pulled on comfortable clothes, and went downstairs. The house felt enormous and empty with Victor gone. She found Marcus in the security office, monitoring feeds from cameras placed throughout the property. He tell you where he went? Marcus asked without looking up. Generally. He's probably right now and telling you anything. Plausible deniability matters in this business. Elena leaned against the doorframe. How do you do it? Live with the violence? By remembering it serves a purpose. Victor doesn't hurt people for fun. He does it to maintain order, to protect what's his, to survive in a world that would eat him alive if he showed weakness. Marcus finally looked at her. That doesn't make it right, but it makes it necessary. Does that actually help you sleep at night? No, but bourbon does. He almost smiled. You'll find your own way to cope. Everyone does. Elena left him to his monitors and ended up in the kitchen, where Maria was prepping for tomorrow's meals. Can't sleep? Maria asked. Victor's out. On business. Ah. Maria didn't need to ask what kind of business. Want some tea? They sat at the kitchen island, 2 women in a crime lord's house, drinking chamomile and not talking about the elephant in the room. Finally, Maria spoke. My husband, before he died, he worked for Victor. Did you know that? Elena shook her head. He was security. Good at his job, loyal. Victor trusted him with everything. Maria's hands wrapped around her mug. He died protecting Victor from an ambush. Took 3 bullets meant for his boss. Victor held him while he died. Maria, I'm so sorry. I'm not telling you for sympathy. I'm telling you so you understand. This life takes people. Sometimes it's enemies. Sometimes it's the people you love. Victor gave me this job after Luis died, has taken care of me for 8 years. But that doesn't bring my husband back. Elena's throat was tight. Why are you telling me this? Because you need to know what you're really risking. It's not just your own life, it's everyone around you. If something happens to Victor, if this all falls apart, everyone in this house pays the price. Maria's eyes were sharp. So you better be sure, mija. You better be absolutely sure he's worth it. Elena thought about Victor's hands on her face, his voice rough with emotion, the way he'd told her about his dead wife with grief still raw after 15 years. Thought about the fear in his eyes when he talked about losing her. Thought about the man behind the mask, damaged and trying and so desperately alone until she'd forced her way in. I'm sure, Elena said. Maria nodded slowly. Then I'll pray you're both strong enough to survive it. Victor came home at 3 a.m. Elena heard the door, heard his footsteps on the stairs, heard him pause outside their room. She kept her breathing even, pretending sleep, giving him the space to collect himself. He showered for a long time. When he finally slipped into bed, he smelled clean, like expensive soap and nothing else. No blood, no smoke, just Victor. I know you're awake, he said quietly. Elena turned to face him in the darkness. How'd it go? The way it needed to. His voice was carefully neutral. Problem solved. Message sent. No complications. Are you okay? Why wouldn't I be? Because you're human. Because even when violence is necessary, it still takes something from you. Elena found his hand in the dark. You're allowed to not be okay. Victor was quiet for a long moment, then so soft she almost missed it. I hate who I become when I do this. Hate the coldness, the calculation, the way I can look at another human being and see only a problem to eliminate. But you do it anyway. Because the alternative is weakness, and weakness in my position gets everyone I care about killed. His grip on her hand tightened. That's the trade-off. I become the monster so the people I love stay safe. Elena pulled him closer, tucking his head against her shoulder, holding him while he held himself together. They didn't talk about specifics, didn't dissect what he'd done, just existed in that dark space together, two broken people trying to figure out how to be whole. Eventually, Victor's breathing evened out, and Elena knew he'd finally fallen asleep. She stayed awake longer, staring at the ceiling, wondering if this was sustainable, if they could really build something lasting in the space between his violence and her acceptance of it. But when morning came and Victor kissed her awake, gentle and present, Elena decided sustainability was tomorrow's problem. Today, they had this. Each other. A fragile thing built on dangerous ground, but theirs nonetheless. And maybe, just maybe, that would be enough. The next 3 weeks fell into a rhythm that felt both normal and surreal. Elena woke up beside Victor, managed the household with her usual efficiency, spent 2 hours every afternoon in the basement learning to shoot, and fell asleep in arms that belonged to one of the most dangerous men in the city. She got better with the gun. Marcus grudgingly admitted she had decent instincts, which coming from him was practically a love letter. She learned to read Victor's moods, to know when he needed space and when he needed her close. She learned which conversations happened over dinner and which ones required bourbon and darkness. The staff adjusted, most of them, anyway. Patricia remained professionally distant but correct. Maria stopped lecturing and started just being present, which Elena appreciated more than she could say. The security team treated her with the same respect they showed Victor, which felt both validating and terrifying. Word spread beyond the estate, exactly as Victor had predicted. Elena started noticing the looks when she accompanied him to meetings. Curiosity, calculation, sometimes outright hostility. She was Victor Hale's woman now, which made her either an asset or a target depending on who was looking. Ryan checked in regularly, his concern genuine, but tinged with something that might have been regret. You're good for him, he told Elena one afternoon when Victor was in back-to-back calls. He's less cold, more human. Didn't think anyone could do that. I'm not trying to change him. I know, that's probably why it's working. Ryan leaned against the kitchen counter, coffee in hand. Just be careful. The more human he becomes, the more vulnerable he is. His enemies will notice. They already had. started small. A delivery driver asking too many questions, someone taking photos of the estate from the road, cars that showed up in Elena's rearview mirror a little too often when she ran errands with Marcus accompanying her. They're testing, Marcus explained during one of their shooting sessions. Seeing how tight security is. Looking for patterns, weaknesses, opportunities. Should I be worried? You should be aware there's a difference. Marcus loaded a fresh magazine with practiced ease. Victor's handling it, making moves, calling in favors, reminding people why crossing him is a bad idea. But yeah, stay alert. Elena had thought she understood what that meant. She'd been wrong. It was a Tuesday afternoon, unseasonably warm, and Elena was in the garden consulting with the landscaper about the fall plantings. Marcus was 10 feet away, his attention split between her and his phone. Everything felt normal, routine, safe. Then the landscaper's phone rang. He answered it, his face going pale, and that's when Elena noticed his hand shaking, noticed the way his eyes darted toward the back gate, noticed Marcus moving, already sensing something wrong. Elena, get down! The gunshot cut off Marcus's warning. The landscaper crumpled, blood blooming across his chest, and Elena's brain struggled to process what was happening. More shots, rapid fire, and Marcus had her on the ground, his body covering hers, his gun already out and returning fire. The world narrowed to heartbeats and gunpowder, and Marcus shouting into his radio for backup. Elena couldn't breathe, couldn't think, could only feel the weight of Marcus's body and the terrible understanding that someone was actively trying to kill her. It lasted maybe 2 minutes, felt like hours. When the shooting stopped, Marcus pulled her up roughly, half carrying her toward the house, while other security personnel swarmed the garden. Are you hit? Marcus demanded, hands running over her arms, checking for wounds she couldn't feel through the adrenaline. I don't think so. Good, inside, now. He got her to the safe room, a reinforced panic room Elena had known existed but never expected to use, and left her there with 2 armed guards while he went to coordinate the response. Elena sat on the floor, her back against the wall, shaking so hard her teeth chattered. The landscaper was dead. She'd watched him die. Someone had paid him to make that call, to create a distraction, to help get to her. And he'd paid for that choice with his life. Elena didn't know how long she sat there. Time felt broken, meaningless. Eventually the door opened and Victor was there, his face a mask of cold fury that cracked the second he saw her. Elena. He crossed the room in 3 strides, pulling her up and into his arms, holding her so tight she couldn't breathe properly. She felt him shaking, or maybe that was her, maybe it was both of them. I'm okay, she managed. You're not. You were almost... His voice broke. If Marcus hadn't been there, if he'd been 1 second slower, but he was there, I'm okay. Elena pulled back enough to see his face. Victor, I'm okay. He kissed her then, desperate and rough, like he was trying to prove to himself she was real. When they finally broke apart, his hands framed her face, thumbs brushing away tears she hadn't realized were falling. Who was it? Elena asked. Dmitry Volkov, Russian outfit, been trying to move into my territory for months. This was his way of declaring war. Victor's expression went cold again. It was a mistake. The landscaper was paid to make that call, to let them know you were in the garden, to create the opening. Victor's jaw clenched. He's not your concern anymore. Because he was dead. Because he'd betrayed them and paid the price. Elena should have felt something about that. Horror, sympathy, something. Instead, she just felt numb. Marcus appeared in the doorway. House is secure. We got 2 of the shooters. One's dead, one's not talking yet. Still looking for the 3rd. Make him talk, Victor said flatly. I don't care how. Already on it. Marcus looked at Elena. You did good out there. Stayed calm, followed instructions. That probably saved your life. I froze. I just stood there. You didn't panic. That's what matters. Marcus nodded once and left. Victor led Elena upstairs to their room, where he made her sit while he examined every inch of her for injuries she didn't have. His hands were gentle but thorough, and Elena let him, understanding he needed this, needed to prove to himself she was whole. This is my fault, he said finally. I should have had more security on you, should have vetted the landscaper better, should have... Stop. Elena caught his hands. This isn't your fault. This is Volkov's fault. He made this choice. Because of me. Because you're with me. Victor's eyes were haunted. I told you this would happen. Told you being with me made you a target. And I chose it anyway. I'm still choosing it. Elena squeezed his hands. Don't you dare use this as an excuse to push me away. Elena, no. I know what you're thinking, that if you distance yourself, if you end this, I'll be safer. But we're past that. They already know I matter to you. Ending our relationship won't make me less of a target now. Victor looked at her for a long moment, and Elena watched the calculation happen behind his eyes, the weighing of options, of risks, of the brutal math that governed his life. You're right, he said finally, which means the only option is eliminating the threat completely. Volkov. And everyone associated with him. I'm going to send a message that will make every other ambitious criminal in this city think twice before coming after what's mine. His voice was ice. This ends tonight. Elena should have been horrified, should have tried to talk him down, to find another way, but she'd almost died today. Had watched a man bleed out on the grass, had felt bullets pass close enough to hear them cutting air. Do what you need to do, she said. Victor studied her face, something shifting in his expression. You mean that? I mean that. I'm tired of being the weakness, tired of being the leverage. If taking out Volkov fixes that, then fix it. It'll be brutal, not clean. I don't need details, I just need it done. Victor kissed her forehead, then her mouth, lingering. I have to go. Could be all night. Marcus will stay with you. Be careful. Always. He was at the door when he paused, looked back. I love you. In case I haven't said it. In case something goes wrong, I love you, Elena. The words hit her like a physical blow. In all of this, the sex, the confessions, the building of something between them, he'd never said that. Had shown it in 1,000 ways, but never voiced it. I love you too, Elena said, her voice steady despite the fear trying to choke her. So don't do anything stupid and come home. Victor's smile was brief but genuine. Yes, ma'am. Then he was gone, and Elena was alone with 2 guards outside her door, and the weight of what was coming settling over everything like a shroud. The night was endless. Elena tried to sleep and couldn't, tried to read and couldn't focus. Ended up sitting by the window, watching the darkness beyond the estate, waiting for sounds that never came. Maria brought her tea around midnight, sitting with her in comfortable silence. They didn't talk about what was happening, didn't need to. They just existed together, 2 women who'd chosen to love men in this dangerous world, waiting to see if their men would come home. Dawn was breaking when Elena finally heard the door. She was down the stairs before conscious thought, arriving in the foyer as Victor walked in. He was bloody, shirt torn, face bruised, knuckles raw, but alive. Elena crashed into him, not caring about the blood or the guards watching or anything except the fact that he was here. Victor caught her, held her up, buried his face in her hair. It's done, he said quietly. Volkov's organization is gone. He's gone. Anyone who might have tried to pick up where he left off is either dead or smart enough to run. It's over. Are you okay? I'll heal. Come on, let's get cleaned up. In their bathroom, Elena helped him out of the ruined clothes, cataloging the damage. Bruises mostly, a few cuts that needed attention but nothing deep. She cleaned him up with steady hands, and Victor let her, too exhausted to protest. Did you kill him? Elena asked as she bandaged a particularly nasty cut on his ribs. Volkov? Yes. Good. Victor's eyes met hers in the mirror. You're not upset about that? He tried to kill me. He paid someone to betray us. He started a war because he was greedy and stupid. Elena pressed tape over the bandage. I'm glad he's dead. Does that make me a bad person? It makes you someone who understands survival. There's a difference. They showered together, washing away blood and gun residue and the exhaustion of a night that had reshaped their world. When they finally collapsed into bed, the sun was fully up, and Elena could hear the house waking around them. We should sleep, Victor said, pulling her against his chest. Yeah. But Elena wasn't sure she could. Too much adrenaline, too much fear finally releasing, too much everything. Hey, Victor's hand tilted her face up. We're okay. We survived. That's what matters. For now, but what about next time? There might not be a next time. What I did tonight, the brutality of it, the completeness, that sends a message. Most people will be too smart to test me after this. Most people isn't all people. No, but it's enough. Victor's thumb traced her lower lip. I can't promise you safety, Elena. I can't promise this life will ever be easy or normal. But I can promise that I will do everything in my power to keep you alive and whole. That has to be enough. Elena thought about that, about the reality of loving a man like Victor Hale, about the trade-offs and the dangers and the brutal arithmetic of survival, about yesterday's terror and this morning's relief and the uncertain future stretching ahead. It is enough, she said finally, as long as we face it together. Always together. Victor kissed her, soft and sure. I meant what I said. I love you. You're the only good thing in my life, and I'm not letting you go. Good. Because I'm not going anywhere. They finally slept, wrapped around each other, and when Elena woke hours later, the first thing she saw was Victor's face, peaceful in sleep, the harsh lines softened by unconsciousness. She studied him. This complicated, damaged, dangerous man who'd somehow become her whole world, and felt something settle in her chest. This was it. This was her life now. The violence and the fear and the constant awareness of danger. But also this, the quiet mornings, the shared space, the knowledge that someone would burn the world down to keep her safe. Elena could live with that. The following days brought change. Word of Volkov's destruction spread fast, and with it, a shift in how people treated Victor. More deference, more caution, the kind of fear-respect that came from understanding exactly how far he'd go to protect what was his. Elena felt it too. The looks changed from calculating to wary. People stopped seeing her as a potential weakness and started seeing her as something else. Victor Hale's claimed territory, marked and defended with extreme prejudice. It should have bothered her, should have made her feel like property. Instead, it felt like armor. 2 weeks after the attack, Victor called her to his study. Elena found him standing at his desk with Marcus, both men looking at documents spread across the surface. We need to talk, Victor said, about your role here. Elena's stomach dropped. My role? You're not just the house manager anymore. That's been clear for a while, but after Volkov, it's undeniable. You're part of this organization now, my partner in every sense. Victor gestured to the documents, which means you need to be officially part of it. Marcus spoke up. What Victor's trying to say is that we want to bring you into the business properly, give you real authority, real knowledge of how things work, make you a player, not just a bystander. Elena looked between them. You want me to be part of your criminal enterprise? I want you to have power, Victor corrected. Real power. So if something happens to me, you're not vulnerable. So people know crossing you has consequences. So you're not just the crime lord's girlfriend, you're a force in your own right. It was tempting, terrifying, but tempting to stop being the protected thing and become something stronger, to have agency in this world instead of just reacting to it. What would that look like? Elena asked. You'd learn the business, the legitimate parts and the rest. You'd meet key players, understand the organization's structure, have input on decisions. Victor moved around the desk. You'd also be more of a target, more visible, more involved in things that could get you arrested or killed. So basically what I'm already doing, but with more information. Essentially. Elena thought about it, about staying in her current limbo, partially aware but deliberately ignorant, about the frustration of that, the helplessness of not fully understanding the world she'd chosen. Yes, she said. I want in, really in. Victor's expression was complicated, relief and concern, and something that might have been pride. You're sure? I'm sure. If I'm going to be in danger anyway, I'd rather be dangerous too. Marcus nodded approvingly. I'll set up meetings. Start introducing you around. You'll need to learn fast. I'm a quick study. And she was. Over the following weeks, Elena learned the intricate machinery of Victor's empire, the legitimate businesses that fronted the operation, real estate holdings, investment firms, restaurants, the less legitimate operations, gambling, protection, selective smuggling of high-value goods. The network of alliances and rivalries that kept the whole thing balanced. She met people whose names she'd only heard whispered before, sat in on meetings where fortunes and territories were discussed like chess moves, watched Victor operate at the highest level, and understood for the first time the full scope of what he'd built. It was impressive and terrifying and exhilarating all at once. "You're good at this," Ryan observed after one particularly tense negotiation that Elena had helped diffuse with careful words. "Natural diplomat. I spent 3 years managing a household full of strong personalities. This isn't that different, just higher stakes. Way higher stakes." "But yeah, same principle," Ryan smiled. "Victor's lucky he found you. We found each other." "Fair enough." That night, Elena and Victor had dinner alone in their room, a rare occurrence given how busy they both were now. Victor poured wine, and they ate in comfortable silence for a while before he spoke. "Do you regret it?" he asked. "Any of it?" Elena considered that. The past 2 months had been chaos, fear and violence and danger and change, but they'd also been real in a way nothing else in her life had been. "No," she said honestly. "It's been terrifying and brutal and nothing like what I imagined, but I don't regret it. Do you?" "I regret that loving me put you in danger. I don't regret loving you." Victor reached across the table, taking her hand. "You've changed everything, Elena. Made me remember what it feels like to be human, to care about something beyond survival and power. You're getting soft in your old age." "Only with you. Everyone else still thinks I'm terrifying." "You are terrifying, but you're also mine, so I get both versions." Victor's smile was genuine, reaching his eyes in a way that still surprised her. "How'd I get this lucky?" "You didn't. You fought it for 3 years. I wore you down. Best decision I never wanted to make." They finished dinner, cleaned up together, another small domesticity that felt precious, and ended up on the balcony off their bedroom, looking out over the estate grounds. Security lights dotted the darkness, and Elena could see guards making rounds. Their life required constant vigilance, constant protection. But standing there with Victor's arms around her, the autumn air cool on her face, Elena felt something close to peace. "I have something for you," Victor said suddenly. He pulled out a small box, and Elena's breath caught. "Victor, it's not what you think. Well, it is, but not how you think." He opened the box, revealing a ring, beautiful but practical, platinum with a single stone that caught the light. "I'm not asking you to marry me. Not yet. Too much chaos, too many complications. But I want you to have this as a promise." "A promise of what?" "That when the dust settles, when things are more stable, when I can offer you something that's not just danger and violence, I'll ask properly. And hopefully you'll say yes." Victor took the ring out, held it. "Until then, this is my promise that you're mine and I'm yours. That we're building something real. That no matter what comes, we face it together." Elena's throat was tight. "That's a terrible proposal that isn't a proposal." "I know, I'm bad at this." "You really are." But she held out her hand and Victor slid the ring on. It fit perfectly, solid and real against her skin. "But I'll take it anyway." "Yeah?" "Yeah. Because you're right. This isn't the time for grand gestures or traditional relationship milestones. This is the time for survival and partnership and figuring out how to make this work." Elena turned in his arms to face him. "But someday, when things calm down, I expect you to ask me properly. With all the romance and sincerity you can manage. I'll do my best." "Your best is pretty good when you try." They kissed under the stars, and Elena felt the weight of the ring, not heavy, just present. A reminder, a promise, a future that wasn't guaranteed but was theirs to fight for. The next morning brought news that would have been devastating weeks ago, but now just felt like more complications to navigate. The FBI was sniffing around Victor's businesses, asking questions, building a case. "How concerned should we be?" Elena asked as they sat in Victor's study with Marcus and Ryan, discussing strategies. "Moderately," Marcus said. "They don't have anything solid yet, but they're persistent. We'll need to be more careful, more clean." "Which means," Elena pressed, "which means scaling back some operations, making sure the legitimate businesses are truly clean, putting more distance between Victor and anything actionable. Ryan tapped the legal documents in front of him. I've already started moving things around. It'll take time, but we can make it work. Victor was quiet, his expression thoughtful. Finally, he spoke. Maybe it's time to go more legitimate anyway. I've been thinking about this for a while. The criminal side of things, it's lucrative, but it's also what puts us in danger. What if we started transitioning, really cleaning things up? Everyone stared at him. Elena found her voice first. You want to go legit? Not overnight, that's impossible. But gradually, yes. Keep the legitimate businesses, grow them, use them to wash out the criminal connections. In 5 years, maybe less, we could be clean. Victor looked at her. It would be safer, for you, for everyone. It would also be less profitable, Marcus pointed out, and it would require navigating some dangerous political waters. People don't just leave this life. People do if they're smart and careful and willing to pay the right prices. Victor's voice was firm. I've built enough, made enough, have enough power that I can do this. It'll take time and strategy, but it's possible. Elena felt something unfurl in her chest. Hope, maybe. The possibility of a future that wasn't defined entirely by violence and danger. Not safety, that might never exist, but something closer to normal. If you're serious about this, Ryan said slowly, I can help. I've got connections in legitimate business, people who can help smooth the transition. But Victor's right, it'll take years, and some people won't like it. Let them not like it. Anyone who wants to challenge me can try. They saw what happened to Volkov. Victor's expression was cold. I'm done living like this. Done putting people I care about at risk for operations that aren't even that important anymore. It's time to evolve. The meeting continued for hours, discussing logistics and timelines and potential obstacles. Elena participated, offering input when relevant, learning more about how these transitions worked. It was complex and risky and would require perfect execution. But it was possible. And for the first time since all this started, Elena could see a path forward that didn't end in violence. That evening, alone again in their room, Elena asked Victor about it directly. Is this really what you want? Or are you doing this because you think it's what I need? Both. I want a life that's more than just survival. Want to build something legitimate that can't be destroyed by enemies or investigations. And yes, I want that for you too. Want to give you a future that's not constantly dangerous. Victor pulled her close. You deserve better than what I've offered so far. You've offered yourself. That's not nothing. It's also not enough. You deserve a life, Elena. A real one. Not just existing in my shadow waiting for the next threat. Elena thought about that. About the past 2 months, the fear and adrenaline and constant awareness of danger. But also the closeness, the partnership, the feeling of finally being seen and valued for exactly who she was. I have a life, she said firmly. Maybe not a conventional one, maybe not a safe one, but it's mine, ours, and I chose it. She cupped his face, making him look at her. I appreciate what you're trying to do. The legitimacy, the safety, all of it, but don't do it because you think I can't handle this world. Do it because it's what you want, because you're ready to evolve. Victor's eyes searched hers. What if I want both? Want to go legitimate and want to give you better? Then we do it together. We build something new. We transition carefully and smartly. But we do it as partners, not as you protecting fragile me from your scary world. You're not fragile. Exactly, so stop treating me like I am. Elena kissed him. I'm in this, all the way, however it evolves. But we make these decisions together. Together, Victor agreed. I'm still getting used to that. You'll figure it out. You're smart when you try. They spent the evening planning, not just the business transition, but their actual future. What they wanted their life to look like in 5 years, 10 years, where they'd live, how they'd operate, what legacy they wanted to build. It was domestic and sweet and utterly at odds with the violence that had defined their relationship so far. But that was the point. They were evolving, building something new on the foundation of what they'd survived together. 6 months later, Elena stood in Victor's study, their study now, since she'd moved half her work in there, reviewing contracts for a real estate deal that was entirely legitimate. The criminal operations had been systematically scaled back, territories sold or absorbed, connections severed or redirected into legal channels. It wasn't complete, probably wouldn't be for another year at least, but progress was visible, tangible. Victor's organization was transforming into something that could survive scrutiny, something that didn't require constant violence to maintain. There had been pushback, a few attempts at power grabs from people who thought Victor was weakening. They'd been handled, not with the brutality of before, but with strategic precision that left no doubt Victor was still very much in control. Elena had been part of those strategies, had learned to wield influence and information the way Victor wielded power. She wasn't just the girlfriend anymore. She was a partner in every sense, her name carrying weight in rooms that mattered. Victor came up behind her, arms sliding around her waist, chin on her shoulder. "You're working late," says the man who was in meetings until 9. "Fair point." He pressed a kiss to her neck. "Come to bed. The contracts can wait until morning." Elena saved her work, let him lead her upstairs. Their nightly routine had become precious, the normalcy of it, the intimacy that had nothing to do with danger or survival. In bed, Victor's hand found the ring he'd given her months ago, twisting it gently. "You know I still owe you a proper proposal." "I know. I'm patient." "Are you?" Elena turned to face him. "Are you asking?" Victor studied her face for a long moment. Then he smiled, that rare, genuine smile that still made her breath catch. "Not yet. Soon, when we're fully legitimate. When I can offer you a life that's more than just chaos and complications. I'll hold you to that. I'm counting on it." They fell asleep tangled together, and Elena dreamed of a future that didn't require guns or safe rooms or constant vigilance. A future where they could just be Elena and Victor, building something real. 1 year after that first dinner with Ryan, Elena stood in the main ballroom of the estate, beautifully decorated for an event that was entirely legitimate, entirely legal, entirely clean. A charity fundraiser hosted by Victor Hale, respected businessman and philanthropist. The transformation was almost complete. Victor's criminal empire had been systematically dismantled, replaced with legitimate businesses that thrived on their own merits. The FBI investigation had quietly closed, finding nothing actionable. Former rivals had become business partners, or had moved on to other targets. It hadn't been easy, had required sacrifices and compromises and careful navigation of dangerous waters, but they'd done it, together. Elena worked the room in a dress that cost more than her first car, comfortable now with these events, with the social performance required. She watched Victor across the room, saw him shake hands with a city councilman, and marveled at the transformation. He was still intense, still commanded attention, but the cold edge had softened. He looked almost happy. Later, when the guests had left and they were alone in the ballroom surrounded by empty champagne glasses and wilting flowers, Victor took her hand. "I have something to ask you," he said. "Victor, properly this time, the way you deserve." He pulled out a different ring, bigger, more elaborate, clearly expensive. "Elena Cross, you walked into my life and changed everything, made me human again, made me want something beyond power and survival. You stood by me through violence and danger and my general inability to communicate like a normal person. You became my partner in every sense, and I love you more than I thought possible." Elena's eyes were already stinging, so I'm asking, officially, properly, with all the romance I can manage. Will you marry me? Will you build this life with me? Whatever it looks like. Whatever comes next. "Yes," Elena said, not even needing to think about it. "Yes, I'll marry you." Victor slid the ring on, bigger than the first one but somehow still practical, still her, and pulled her into a kiss that tasted like champagne and promise. When they broke apart, both smiling, Elena looked at the man who'd been untouchable for so long and saw only Victor, her partner, her future, the person who'd fought his own nature to let her in. "So," she said, "when do you want to do this? The wedding? Soon? Small? Just us and the people who matter?" Sounds perfect. And it was. 3 months later, they married in the estate's garden, the same garden where Elena had almost died, now reclaimed and beautiful. Just family and close friends, nothing elaborate, nothing showy, Just two people who'd fought for each other, choosing to make it permanent. Maria cried. Marcus actually smiled. Ryan gave a toast that managed to be both sincere and funny. And when Victor kissed his bride, Elena felt like everything had finally clicked into place. Their life wasn't perfect. Probably never would be. Victor still had edges of darkness that couldn't be erased. Elena still carried a gun more often than she'd like. They still had enemies, still had complications, still had to be more careful than most people. But they had each other. They had partnership and trust, and a foundation built on honesty, however brutal. They had a future they'd fought to build, brick by brick, decision by decision. 6 months after the wedding, Elena found out she was pregnant. The news terrified them both. Bringing a child into their world, even a cleaned-up version of it, felt impossibly risky. But it also felt right, like the final evolution of what they'd built together. Victor was protective to the point of ridiculousness, hovering and worrying and driving Elena crazy with his constant concern. But underneath the anxiety was joy, hope, the possibility of something beyond themselves. Their daughter was born on a spring morning, perfect and healthy, and absolutely oblivious to the complicated legacy she'd inherited. They named her Sarah, after the wife Victor had lost, and Elena watched him hold their child with tears streaming down his face, and knew they'd made it, really made it. Standing at the window of their bedroom years later, Sarah asleep down the hall, Victor's arm around her waist, the estate quiet and safe around them. Elena thought about that first night. When Ryan had asked her to dinner and Victor had followed them and everything had exploded into chaos and feeling. She'd been so scared then, so uncertain, so desperately in love with someone she thought would never love her back. Now she knew better. Victor Hale was capable of love, fierce, protective, all-consuming love. He just needed someone stubborn enough to wait for him to figure it out, someone brave enough to walk into his darkness and drag him back into the light. "What are you thinking about?" Victor asked, his voice low to not wake their daughter. "How far we've come. How different everything is." "Better different?" "Much better." Elena turned in his arms to face him. "We made it, Victor, against all odds through all the chaos. We actually made it." "We did." He kissed her forehead, lingering. "Thank you." "For what?" "For not giving up on me. For being stubborn and brave and willing to fight for this. For choosing me when you could have chosen safety." "Safety's overrated. I chose love instead. Best choice either of us ever made." They stood there in the quiet, two people who'd fought their way to something real, something lasting. The road had been brutal and terrifying and nothing like what either of them expected, but they'd walked it together. And in the end, that made all the difference.